This video was brought to you by Nebula. Thanks! This day was always going to come. The day that I sat down and discussed the films that not only rocked my world, but kickstarted my love for film and filmmaking. These 3 films had me in such a chokehold from age 11, my obsession almost bordered on religious fervor. I would spend hours preaching the gospel at summer camp, telling one girl every niche factoid about the creation of these films that I had burned into my brain. In the lead up to the release of the 3rd film, I annoyed one boy in my language arts class every single day by telling him exactly how many more days until the final film was released. I have done the marathon where I watched all 3 films in one sitting multiple times, extended editions only, we don't play in this household. If you're not picking up what I'm putting down yet, we're talking about the Lord of the Rings trilogy, so let's go there and back again on a very expected journey. God, that's a stupid joke. Anyway, roll credits.
Where to begin?
Well, The Lord of the Rings is a trilogy of books written by John Ronald Reuel Tolkien as a sequel to his children's book The Hobbit. The trilogy was written over 10 or so years and published from 1954 to 1955. Well, okay, let me start again. The Lord of the Rings is a trilogy of films directed by Peter Jackson that permanently rewrote my brain chemistry at age 11. No, wait. The Lord of the Rings is actually an animated film from 1978 made by, and I say this affectionately, known little freak Ralph Bakshi, who across most of his filmography seemingly declared every woman shall have pointy nipples or my name's not Ralph Bakshi. No, that's not it. The Lord of the Rings is a series of radio plays, most famously the 1981 BBC radio play written by Tolkien scholar Brian Sibley and Michael Bakewell and starring Ian Holm as Frodo Baggins. Well, The Lord of the Rings is a trilogy of films that were made as a labor of love and passion by a group of dedicated individuals putting their everything into meticulously crafting the best movies they could, or well, The Lord of the Rings is a 2006 stage musical that tried to tell the entire saga in one 3-hour show with some sick-ass music and... The Lord of the Rings is a trilogy of films that helped to reshape our modern film landscape into the franchise-obsessed blockbuster hell of our modern age. The Lord of the Rings has been a lot of things.
Things that were, things that are, and some things that have not yet come to pass.
But to start with, I will tell you how I first was introduced to The Lord of the Rings, beyond the vague recollections of seeing the animated Rankin and Bass Hobbit film. I was aware of the upcoming films in a vague sense. I think I remember reading an article about them in a magazine in the waiting room of a doctor's office. I'm sure I saw trailers. But my true introduction came through my parents, both of whom are big fans of The Lord of the Rings. My mom used to reread the books once a year. These are her well-loved copies from the 70s. But when The Fellowship of the Ring was released in theaters on December 19th, 2001, both of my parents, I'm pretty sure, went to see it on opening weekend, probably on nights when us kids were at the other parent's house, and somebody told me afterwards, it was great, but you would hate it, there's monsters in it. And I apologize if you've heard me tell this story before on a live stream or something, I think it's very funny, because then my dad bought the DVD upon its release and put it on during dinner. I got to about the first Nazgul scene, and went,
"Okay, I'm out, can't do this anymore, need to go home."
Now, for some amount of time, I dawdled in the bathroom, but with my dad's pretty intense sound system, I could still hear everything. Then the movie got to the wizard fight, and I would like you to imagine being 11 years old and hearing this audio with no context. I was terrified. I ran to my dad's office to hide, and he was like, "I don't know why you're so upset. This isn't even the one with the giant spider." And I was like,
"No, don't like that."
Basically, I holed up in his office and watched Disney for 3 hours and tried resolutely to ignore any sounds I could hear of the movie everybody else was enjoying. But the next day, I was curious. I wanted to know what happened. So I sat my older sister down and commanded that she watch the movie with me while it was still bright outside, and also she had to tell me when to close my eyes. And she did. I believe she told me to cover my eyes for the cave troll and Balrog scenes, but nonetheless, once I saw the entire film, I was entranced. I think I might have turned to her when the movie was over and went, "That's it?" And she went, "I know, right?" Consequently, copies of the books circulated between me and my sisters as we eagerly awaited the next film installment. I watched The Fellowship of the Ring religiously. Then when my dad bought the extended edition, I watched that one even more, and all the extra behind the scenes and commentaries. By the time The Two Towers came out, I was an avid fan. I have a vivid memory of jumping around my bedroom after seeing The Two Towers in theaters because I was pretending to be Legolas shieldboarding down the stairs. And I only covered my eyes once in the theater during the Dead Marcia scene. It took me 14 viewings of Return of the King to not bawl my eyes out at the ending, although in light of recent events in my life, I am once again weeping as soon as I hear those goddamn flutes. Now, the plot of The Lord of the Rings is, there's a ring and it's bad.
Frodo, go wear the ring.
They will have to destroy the ring, and hobbits are small. I will give a brief plot synopsis, but first let me run down the cast and crew, most of whom I am deeply parasocial about. I call these people by their first names, and I have things that they've said over 20 years ago basically burned into my brain. So to start off with, these movies were co-written and directed by Peter Jackson, who got to start making deeply weird horror movies like Bad Taste, Dead Alive, and Meet the Feebles. He did a mockumentary called Forgotten Silver, and his period drama Heavenly Creatures got a Best Screenplay nomination at the Oscars before he went on to make The Lord of the Rings. After the trilogy, he made a King Kong movie that I didn't particularly like, and Lovely Bones, which is a film. He came back to do the Hobbit movies, which are very bad, and seemingly is more interested in exploring advancements in film technology these days, like that World War I documentary where he spruced up old footage. The movies were also written by Fran Walsh, Jackson's wife, and a third collaborator, Philippa Boyens. Both women have continued to collaborate with Jackson on his films, or films he produced in the years since. Films like Lovely Bones, Mortal Engines, etc. And Fran Walsh in particular has been working with Jackson on his films since Meet the Feebles. Howard Shore did the music and has since worked on Hugo, The Aviator, The Departed, Gangs of New York, Eastern Promises, Doubt, the Hobbit movies, and most recently The Pale Blue Eye, and Cronenberg films like Crimes of the Future. He deserves every Oscar he's ever received for The Lord of the Rings, and even the Hobbit movies, which are not very good, do have some excellent music. Now for the cast, there is our protagonist, Frodo Baggins, played by Elijah Wood. Elijah Wood seems like, and I'm not in the least bit objective when I say this, the nicest person. When he got pranked by Dominic Monaghan, this was his response.
But I must tell you now that it is Dom Monaghan talking to you.
Brilliant.
How are you, mate? How are you?
I knew it. That was
love
brilliant, you ass.
Mate,
oh,
we got
that's
it.
so awesome.
We filmed it on the DVD, so you're gonna be.
No!
Yeah.
Yes!
He and Daniel Radcliffe have followed a similar trajectory as child actors who starred in one big franchise and then dedicated their career to being little freaks. In his early years, Elijah Wood was in stuff like North and Flipper.
You make a movie called Flipper. Very
Yes.
famous movie. The dolphin is dead.
No, I did not know that. That's terrible.
Died in a car accident.
And after Lord of the Rings, he's been in stuff like Wilfred, Over the Garden Wall, and Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency.
Why did you attack us?
We didn't! How do you know who we are?
We don't. Where's the kitten?
What kitten? Who's that woman?
You don't know her?
Do you?
Why did you burn my house down?
I burnt your house down? Where's Lydia?
She's not here. Bring me the dog.
Why do you want it?
Why did you take it?
We don't know!
Why did you kill Patrick Spring?
We didn't! Did you?
He likes music, I think he's produced some, and he might still be sad that Tig isn't a real game.
And myself and Dom just started tigging each other, touching each other and going, tig, tig, just like for no reason. And then Sean came over and started doing it as well, tig. like, for no reason.
Tom Tig.
And then Elijah came over and said, what you guys doing? I said, we're playing a game called Tig. And he says, how do you play? And then we spent like the next 2 hours making up rules.
No, Elijah, you can't Tig on a Tog, you can't tag on a Tig. You have to do an elephant impression if you're going to Tig Billy. If Billy's going to Tig you back, you have to get on your knees and take your trousers down.
How many times, Elijah, you can't double Tig a tag? But do you remember that we forgot to say it was a wind-up?
Yeah.
And it was like a year later, he says, why do we never play Tig?
And then they finally let the tag out of the bag. My whole world came shattering down on me when they told me that was a lie.
Sean Astin plays Frodo's possibly queer platonic life partner and gardener, Samwise Gamgee.
So I think Sam and Frodo should have kissed. First of all, how do you know they didn't? It's a long trek to Mordor.
Sean Astin is another former child star. He starred in stuff like The Goonies and Rudy. I really liked this movie he did called Memphis Belle. Post Lord of the Rings, he did 50 First Dates and Stranger Things and has popped up to be affable in things. In real life, he has at least one child as of the filming of Lord of the Rings. I don't know if he's had more. He was extremely safety conscious all of the time and just generally seemed very earnest about trying to capture this story.
I remember feeling really passionate that they had to get I needed them to get that right.
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
As an audience member, the Shire has got to be so lush and so green and so real.
Were really brown.
Well, but it looked fantasy, and it's like, to me, I didn't want it to be a fantasy. I wanted it to be a history, and so the Shire, I wanted it to just be natural.
Rounding out the Hobbits, we have Billy Boyd as Peregrine Took.
Is that serious? This is making a movie here.
And Dominic Monaghan as Meriadoc Brandybuck.
It's my new assistant. I'm sick of walking, so.
These two are ridiculous together in real life.
Billy Boyd's a unique guy. I'm so just blessed to have met him,
Dom's an idiot.
They have since started a podcast together called The Friendship Onion. Post Lord of the Rings, Dom starred in Lost, which I did watch all of. I loved his character. I'm very upset about everything that happened to him. Billy Boyd was in Master and Commander and The Flying Scotsman. Both of them do a lot of voice work in character roles these days. Viggo Mortensen played Aragorn and was perfect. He was a late addition to the cast, and he really threw himself into the part. He was in Hidalgo, Eastern Promises, History of Violence, and Crimes of the Future. His career immediately post the trilogy was pretty interesting, but lately he seems a lot choosier about his projects, and unfortunately some of those projects are Green Book. He's very into horses. He went to great lengths to work with the horse who played Brigo to accomplish this stunt, and bought the horse after production completed. He also got really into the stunt work and bonded with the stunt team to the point that anytime any of them bumped into each other after the filming, they would headbutt each other, like on red carpets and stuff. I hope they still do.
I don't know where that comes from. You know what? I think it's spontaneous, violent love.
Orlando Bloom played Legolas. He went on to play Will Turner in the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, as well as be in Troy, Kingdom of Heaven, my mom's favorite movie Elizabethtown.
Did I miss 60 feet? God, no!
And unfortunately, Carnival Row. On The Lord of the Rings, he famously cracked a rib.
But if you're talking about something life-changing, something huge, something that really had a deep effect on all of us, not only the person that it happened to, but the crew and most of the Western Hemisphere, Orlando breaking his rib was huge.
A week later, cracked rib? Oh, is it still cracked, is it? Right, okay.
Whinging.
I think it's still healing.
People really love to meme on Legolas in the background of scenes, but when you listen to him in the commentaries, I think everything he did was very genuine.
He has great posture and pose and poise, and he's wanted an audience to feel like when he's on screen, he's capable of taking care of business.
John Rhys-Davies played the dwarf Gimli and voiced Treebeard the Ent, and has had a long and storied career. He was in the Indiana Jones films, he was in Victor Victoria, and most importantly to me, he was Aladdin's dad in the third Aladdin movie.
Let him go. Boy is my son.
He had a pretty miserable time on the Lord of the Rings films because he was allergic to the prosthetics he wore and was really uncomfortable pretty much constantly. He's very good-humored about it in all the behind-the-scenes stuff.
There. Gotcha.
but also very honest that he was really uncomfortable all of the time and he hated it. He gleefully set fire to his final prosthetic when he finished filming.
Well, there goes my career.
And when they made the Hobbit movies, he basically showed up to be like, lol, I'm not doing that again, good luck guys.
You poor buggers.
Andy Serkis played Gollum, which involved basically inventing modern motion capture technology. He did voice work, and he was on the set in a ridiculously ugly white onesie that they called a gimp suit, and wrecked his voice to do the Gollum voice. He was drinking a concoction of warm honey and lemon juice constantly just to be able to keep doing it. Since The Lord of the Rings, he has gone on to be one of the biggest actors in anything involving motion capture. He was in The Adventures of Tintin, he plays the main monkey in the new Planet of the Apes films, he was also incredible in Andor and played Snoke in the new Star Wars trilogy. Ian McKellen played Gandalf.
A wizard is never late, Frodo Baggins. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.
And he also played Magneto in the X-Men films and has done loads of theater and came out as openly gay in 1988 and has been championing LGBTQ causes in the UK ever since.
Now come the days of the Queen.
Here he is being adorable with some school kids.
If you don't do your revision properly, do you know what will happen? You shall not pass!
And the last of the main fellowship was Boromir, played by Sean Bean, an actor who is basically famous for dying in things a lot. He was in Game of Thrones, James Bond, one of the National Treasure movies, and most importantly to me, Jupiter Ascending, where he played Stinger, a bee man. And his brother Faramir was played by Australian actor David Wenham, who in the years since I've mainly seen play slimeballs and weirdos in things like Marvel's Iron Fist, Van Helsing, and Baz Luhrmann's Australia. He seems really funny in real life. Here he is explaining why he was cast to play Sean Bean's brother.
It's true though. Look, yeah, absolutely. We both have big noses. I'm just going to go like this. And you can see my profile.
And also, according to the horse wranglers, he was a terrible horse rider. During the really famous charge on Osgiliath scene, he's on a barrel.
The best direction that they can give people, make out as though you're actually having sex on the barrel.
Say to David Wenham, fuck this horse, will you?
Denethor, Boromir and Faramir's dad, and the steward of Gondor, was played by John Noble. Noble has mainly worked in theater, but in the years since Lord of the Rings has had a steady stream of roles playing complicated dads. He may have been a bit typecast from this movie. He was a complicated dad in the TV show Fringe, and voiced two different flavors of the same complicated dad character in Star Trek Prodigy. Elrond, the Elven Lord of Rivendell, was played by Hugo Weaving, who also famously played Agent Smith in the Matrix movies, leading to a whole lot of memes about Agent Elrond who would say things like, "Hobbits are a virus." Hugo Weaving also played Red Skull in the first Captain America and V in V for Vendetta. Fun fact, I have his V speech memorized from that movie.
In view, a humble vaudevillian veteran, cast vicariously as both victim and villain by the vicissitudes of fate.
Arwen, Elrond's daughter and Aragorn's lady love, was played by Liv Tyler, who has starred in things like Jersey Girl, That Thing You Do, The Leftovers, and Harlots. She's got an incredible presence as Arwen, and really managed to make her character come alive in spite of the many different directions they took Arwen while trying to figure out how to incorporate her more into the story. She seems really sweet in real life.
And when I think about how I saw them, it's completely different to how I see them now, but they're all so cute.
Galadriel, the elf queen of Lothlorien, was played by Cate Blanchett, who is still popping off in films like Carol, Thor Ragnarok, Tar, the 2015 Cinderella, and some really fun silly stuff like Joe Wright's Hannah or The House with the Clock in Its Walls. Eowyn, Shield Maiden of Rohan, was played by Miranda Otto, who has since starred in things like The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina and the War of the Worlds remake, and she's another one who really threw herself into the physical aspects of her character, always trying to find the balance of strength and vulnerability in Eowyn. Also, check out this clip.
It's worked pretty well.
Eomer was played by Carl Urban, who has since gone on to have a huge career in genre cinema, playing Bones in the new Star Trek films, Judge Dredd in the Judge Dredd remake, and he's been in the popular Amazon show The Boys for the last couple of years. Although Eomer doesn't get many moments to shine in the trilogy, the moments he had were deeply memorable, and I just really love Carl Urban as Bones in Star Trek.
You look like crap, Jim. Now look, you gave Nurse Chapel the Gangorian clan.
I know.
She's not happy about it, Jim.
Bernard Hill played Theoden, the uncle to Éowyn and Éomer, and the King of Rohan. He passed away in 2024, and I'm really sad about it. His biggest other role was probably the captain in Titanic, but he seems like a really fun guy on set and in the commentaries.
On ADR, we did a spoof of this. What else would he be saying here? Right, fed the cat. Oh, bugger, left the gas on. I'm going to slash an imaginary orc sitting on an imaginary warg with an imaginary sword. I don't know why I'm here. Stop that. Now behave yourself. Honestly.
I think a lot about the story he told where this woman spoke to him. I think about a play he was in that really spoke to her. The line Theoden says about his son in the film is what she said to him.
No parent should have to bury their child.
I think about that a lot. Ian Holm played Bilbo Baggins and sadly passed away in 2020. He starred in Alien and Animal Farm and played Frodo in the BBC radio play of Lord of the Rings. He was, according to Ian McKellen, a brave performer who got really out there with some of his acting choices, allowing the editors to choose what they liked best.
He provided what he called a kaleidoscope of Bilbo for Peter Jackson to eventually look through and shake into whatever configuration he wanted.
Christopher Lee played the wizard Saruman and passed away in 2015, but he was another incredible actor with an amazing career. He did loads of Hammer horror films with Peter Cushing in the 50s and 60s. He played Dracula in The Horror of Dracula.
Something vaguely familiar about this situation. 27 years ago, when I looked up, I saw Peter Cushing. 27 years later, in New Zealand, I look up and I see Peter Jackson.
He played Count Dooku in the Star Wars prequels. He starred in a bunch of Tim Burton films. He sang opera and was in a metal band, and at one point was some sort of Special Forces secret agent during World War II. All I know is that he corrected Peter Jackson when Jackson made the mistake of trying to direct him on the sound one might make when being stabbed in the back, because Christopher Lee knew exactly the sound somebody would make when being stabbed in the back.
It's not, I like that.
It's because the breath's driven out of your body.
He was cool, had the most incredible voice, and was a huge Tolkien fan, like for real. Also, this clip made me laugh.
To advise, persuade. I'm sorry, I cannot get up these goddamn steps smoothly. I can't do it, Peter. I'm sorry, because every time I try, I step on the thing.
Brad Dourif played Wormtongue, a sinister agent of Saruman, and is probably best known for playing Chucky in the Chucky movies and a role in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. For the Lord of the Rings movies, the poor guy kept having to shave his eyebrows anytime he was called back to film some more stuff. They kept having to call him back for reshoots or just because of the way the schedule demanded his time, so he kept having to reshave his eyebrows. Also, he was very concerned about having the correct accent as an American actor, so he maintained the British accent for all of filming.
That's a big 10-4. What was that, buddy?
And when he finally dropped it after filming was completed, Bernard Hill said he thought his American accent sounded fake. Whew, okay, that's the cast. I couldn't bear to skim over any of them. I've been following pretty much everybody's career from before and after these films ever since I saw them. I love watching anytime the cast get together for little reunions and stuff. They were all so perfect for their parts in these films. Now, for the uninitiated, I will give you a quick plot rundown of the film trilogy, but I am not doing a beat-by-beat recap because I don't want this video to be as long as the films I'm covering. But the basic plot is, Bilbo Baggins is a hobbit living in the nicest little town you ever did see called the Shire.
Bilbo Baggins, the bravest little hobbit of them all.
There's a whole other book about him, you can read it if you want. But the main thing is, Bilbo picked up this ring and oops, turns out it's evil and must be destroyed. It's so evil that owning it will mess with you over time, but hobbits are so wholesome, they're a bit more resilient to the ring compared to men. Bilbo has a party and then vanishes, and then leaves the Shire, and the ring is given to Bilbo's nephew Frodo.
They cannot stay in the Shire!
No, it can't.
His best friend and gardener, Samwise Gamgee, goes with him.
Your bodyguard is Gardener.
Along with his two other buds, / cousins, Merry and Pippin.
You're supposed to stick it in the ground.
It has in the ground.
Outside.
That was your idea.
Along the way, Frodo gets stabbed and meets this guy called Strider. Meanwhile, Gandalf the Grey goes to meet Saruman the White.
My old friend.
It goes bad.
We must join with him, Gandalf. We must join with Sauron.
Saruman the stupid. What? Saruman the silly. Stop that. Saruman the stinky! No!
Everybody goes to Rivendell, where this guy Elrond holds a council to decide what to do with the ring. Frodo says he'll take the ring to Mordor.
No, I do not know the way.
Strider, aka Aragorn, aka...
and heir to the throne of Gondor.
says he'll come too.
You have my sword.
along with Legolas the elf.
And you have my bow.
Gimli the dwarf.
And my axe.
Also Gandalf the Grey, Boromir from Gondor, and of course Frodo's best friends, Sam, Merry, and Pippin.
You shall be the Fellowship of the Ring.
Right. Where are we going?
Boromir's kind of a lot, by the way.
One does not simply walk into Mordor. There is evil there that does not sleep.
But he seems to really bond with Merry and Pippin, and it's sweet. So they set off.
Mordor, Gandalf. Is it left or right?
Left.
And in Moria, there's a lot of orcs they have to fight.
I think I'm getting the hang of this.
A cave troll.
They have a cave troll.
And also a Balrog.
A Balrog has come! Kick him in the eye! You shall not fuck with me!
The Balrog goes down and takes Gandalf with him.
Fly, you fools!
Galadriel, the elf queen of Lothlorien, is helpful but also creepy.
One who has seen me high.
And the Fellowship is separated when Boromir is tempted by the ring, causing Frodo to try and go to Mordor alone.
I'm going to Mordor alone.
Of course you are. And I'm coming with you!
Boromir then dies trying to protect Merry and Pippin from the orcs. It's very sad.
Oh, people. Oh, people.
Aragorn tells Legolas and Gimli they will not abandon Merry and Pippin to torment and death.
We travel light. Let us hunt some orc.
Boom! Okay, Two Towers. This little freak is named Gollum. He had the ring before Bilbo, it's his precious, and he ends up being Frodo and Sam's guide to get to Mordor.
You will lead us to the Black Gate.
Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli pursue the orcs who kidnap Merry and Pippin. Legolas says the line,
They're taking the hobbits to Isengard! God!
In the end, they fail to find Merry and Pippin, but they do find Gandalf. He's not dead, and now he's Gandalf the White.
This new Gandalf's more grumpy than the old one.
They go to Edoras and free Theoden the King from a curse so they can prepare for Saruman's next attack. Meanwhile, Merry and Pippin befriend a tree.
Tree? I am no tree. I am an ent.
So Treebeard is a tree herder, and Merry and Pippin eventually convince him and his Ent and tree friends to fight back against Saruman, who has been cutting down Fanghorn Forest to fuel his war. Meanwhile, Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, Theoden, and Theoden's niece Eowyn, and all of the Rohirrim go to Helm's Deep, a location that's supposed to be secure enough to hold out against a siege, but it will leave them cornered and vulnerable. The Battle of Helm's Deep happens, it's huge.
What's happening out there?
Shall I describe it to you? Or would you like me to find you a box?
Gandalf shows up in the nick of time with Éomer, Theoden's nephew who got excommunicated when Theoden was cursed. Gandalf, Éomer, and all of Éomer's guys help turn the tide. It's sick as hell. Also, the Ents take down Isengard, and it's awesome. Check out my favorite guy. Gollum, Frodo, and Sam end up being taken by Faramir, Boromir's brother, to Osgiliath. Faramir is not very chill and tempted by the ring, but Sam gives the raddest speech in the history of cinema.
There's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo. And it's worth fighting for.
And Faramir's like, you know what? You're too cute for me to be mean. You can go. Fuck my dad. His dad is very mean. We'll get to it. But Gollum was severely mistreated by the Gondorians, and so he's like, I'm gonna get these hobbits dead. I'm gonna take them to a terrifying giant spider named Shelob. Okay, Return of the King. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, plus Gandalf, Theoden, and co. reunite with Merry and Pippin. Saruman gets stabbed and dies. Pippin finds this thing called the Palantir. It's bad news bears, but Pippin manages to not give anything away. They learn Sauron's next target is Gondor, so Gandalf and Pippin go to Gondor. Merry stays with the Rohirrim, and yes, separating these two breaks my heart.
We'll see each other soon, won't we? Don't know what's going on. Merry.
Run, Shadowfax. Show us the meaning of haste.
Merry!
In Gondor, Denethor is terrible to his surviving son Faramir, says he wishes Faramir had died and Boromir had lived. Jesus Christ! Pippin and Faramir bond, then Faramir goes on a suicide mission and nearly dies. Also, Pippin, against Denethor's command and with Gandalf's help, lights the Beacons of Gondor, which is basically an SOS, send help, also one of the best sequences in the movie.
The beacons of Minas City! The beacons are lit!
Gun knuckles for aid!
And Rohan will answer.
Then Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli go to the Paths of the Dead because it's Aragorn's destiny as the soon-to-be-returned King of Gondor. Look at this cool big sword! Look at all these bones! Merry and Éowyn go to the big fight for Gondor, even though they're both told not to.
Ride with me, my lady.
Frodo is not doing good with the ring, fellas. Sam is suspicious of Gollum. Gollum makes Frodo suspicious of Sam. Frodo tells Sam to go home, and it makes me very upsetty spaghetti. But then Sam realizes that Gollum tricked them and then goes back for his boy. Then Frodo gets got by Shelob, and Sam kills Shelob, but thinks Frodo is dead, then realizes he isn't, and rescues him from orcs so they can make their way to the unfortunately named Crack of Doom. Meanwhile, the fight for Gondor happens, and it's even huger than Helm's Deep! Denethor is not helpful.
Abandon your post!
And then he,
There is no victory.
does that. Theoden gives this rad speech where they all end up yelling. And it'll make you want to go outside and yell death. It's awesome. Then Theoden dies and it's sad. Eowyn tries to protect him and kills the Witch King and says the thing.
I am no man.
She's injured though, and so is Merry. But Aragorn brought an army of ghosts to save the day and sends them on their way. When the fight is done, the survivors recover, Faramir and Eowyn heal in the aptly named Houses of Healing and are cute together. Aragorn suggests everybody make one last stand at the gates of Mordor to provide Frodo and Sam more time and distract Sauron from their attempts to destroy the ring in Mount Doom.
Certainty of death? Small chance of success. What are we waiting for?
Aragorn gives another rad speech.
A day may come when the courage of men fails, when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship. But it is not this day. This day we fight!
And on the slopes of Mount Doom, Frodo's strength is failing.
Come on, Mr. Frodo. I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you.
When they get to the Crack of Doom, Gollum shows up again and Frodo gives in to temptation and says,
The ring is mine.
Frodo and Gollum fight for the ring. Gollum bites off Frodo's finger to get it, and then they both fall, but Frodo hangs from a ledge and Sam pulls him back, and the ring is finally destroyed. Yay! Then the Eagles show up and get the pair out of Mordor, if you're wondering why they didn't show up earlier.
This is my book, motherfucker! They'll walk if I tell them to! Get that weak-ass bird shit out of here!
Everybody reunites. There's a lot of slow-motion laughter. Aragorn is crowned king and reunites with Arwen, his love. It's cute. He also tells the hobbits they bow to no one. The hobbits return home to the Shire. Sam marries his crush Rosie Cotton, but Frodo's injuries never fully heal, so he goes with Bilbo, Gandalf, Galadriel, and Elrond to the Grey Havens, which is basically heaven. Everybody cries buckets, including me. Sam goes home to his family.
I'm back.
The end. Now let's talk a bit about some issues. So it has to be said up top when discussing issues with Tolkien's work at large, the man was born in 1892. Throughout his life, he remained a man of his time, and so where his politics fall short, it's mainly due to the time and place in which he lived. Like, it's just basic fact that these stories, in all their iterations, are deeply colonialist and obsessed with monarchs. You know, there is one rightful king of Gondor, Aragorn, and one of Rohan, Theoden. And everybody else who could be a leader is weak and easily swayed by evil. Theoden is briefly sort of magically poisoned by Saruman into just being a victim of elder abuse for a while, but he is returned to his former king glory by Gandalf, and especially in the films, by the support of the soon-to-be king Aragorn. Also, the army of the dead is forever cursed because they broke a promise to a king, and that is seen as reasonable and justified, making the king's justice an almost cosmic force. Also, Aragorn's just better than his predecessors and never truly tempted by the ring ever, making him the kingiest king. Even the villains have a singular ruling power that only they can harness.
There is only one Lord of the Ring. Only one who can bend it to his will. And he does not share power.
That's just kind of there on its face, although if one wants to view the Ents as an indigenous people, then Saruman is colonizing their land, cutting down trees, etc. And that is seen as bad. But the Lord of the Rings ultimately views colonialism as good as long as it's being done by the right people.
The horsemen took your land. They drove your people into the hills to scratch a living off rocks.
Now, Tolkien's racism has been much discussed. I think everybody's heard that quote where he compared orcs to least lovely Mongol types. The excellent fan-run encyclopedia Tolkien's Gateway has an entire page devoted to instances of racism throughout his life and works. One bit that jumped out to me personally when revisiting the books was a brief passage in The Fellowship of the Ring when they're in Bree. There's this shady character named Bill Ferny who associates with a suspicious stranger from the south who is described as squint-eyed, and later as having a sallow face and sly, slanting eyes. Frodo, upon observing this man, thinks to himself, he looks more than half like a goblin. Hey, Jolkin, Rolkin, Tolkien? What, dare I ask, the fuck? In 2003, speculative fiction author China Mieville was interviewed for New Politics magazine, and when discussing the legacy of fantasy and its sometimes colonialist tendencies, the long shadow cast by Tolkien's work came up, and Mieville stated, "This is not to say that Tolkien was personally a racist, and in fact he was splendidly angry with his German publishers for trying to ascertain whether he was Aryan. He was appalled by their anti-Semitism. However, the point about Tolkien and his heirs is that whether or not they are racist, whether or not their characters are racist, theirs are worlds in which racism is true, in that people really are defined by their race. If you are an orc in Middle-earth, you are, definitionally, a shit. If you are an elf, you might be difficult to deal with, but you are, definitionally, noble." The films, in their own way, at times double down on the racism present in the text, presenting many baddies as Middle Eastern coded or that, or the scene where Faramir monologues over the corpse of a brown man to show us that he's pretty deep. Say what you will about Rings of Power, I certainly have, but the one positive thing I can say about the most expensive TV series ever made is that it imagines a Middle-earth where our heroes aren't entirely white. That is an improvement, and a place where my favorite films do lack. Although, interestingly, when it comes to the problematic racial coding of the villains, it seems even in 2001 they were sort of aware of the minefield they were walking into.
And Philippa Boyens, the writer, came down and went, "Hang on, you can't make them look African. That would just be rude. Yet another race of bad guys, with dark skin."
So they realized making their bad guys quote-unquote African could be problematic, but chose instead to lean into Aztec, Eastern, and Maori influences. For those who don't understand why this is weird, all our good guys are white. Their cultures are based on European cultures. So to have all the bad guys be people of color or coded as ethnic minorities says some stuff. And it may have been unintentional. For 2001, I'm kind of impressed they thought of it at all. But it still shows us the limits of their imagination at the time in how they realized Middle-earth on screen. I'm going to link to the page on the Tolkien Gateway website if you want to look more into this. It's well-sourced and has been much discussed. But what hasn't been discussed half as much was Tolkien's anti-Semitism. It's not a straightforward thing to discuss, and frankly, it is more prevalent in The Hobbit, a novel published in 1937, than in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. But one time I got yelled at by a well-known internet personality for bringing this up, so let's just say I have an axe to grind.
Did you intend, in The Lord of the Rings, that certain races should embody certain principles? The elves' wisdom, the dwarfs' craftsmanship, men, husbandry and battle, and so forth?
Didn't intend it, but when you've got these people on your hands, you've got to make them different, haven't you? The dwarves, of course, quite obviously. Couldn't you say in many ways they remind you of the Jews? All their words are Semitic, obviously, and constructed be Semitic. There's a tremendous love of the artifact. And, of course, the immense warlike capacity of the Jews do, which we tend to forget nowadays.
Now, I will tell you, some transcripts quote this question,
couldn't you say in many ways they remind you of the Jews?
To Tolkien, and others credit it to the interviewer Dennis Geralt. But either way, this was for some BBC radio program, and he says the dwarven language Khuzdul is Semitic. In Zach Kramer's essay, Jewish Influences in Middle-earth, Kramer elucidates this connection further, pointing out, for example, Gimli's battle cry at the Siege of the Hornburg is Baruch Kazad, Axes of the Dwarves. Baruch means bless in Hebrew, and Gimli's war cry recapitulates the traditional form of a Jewish blessing. Orthodox Jews can be heard saying Baruch Hashem many, if not hundreds of times a day. It means something like bless or thank God. In a letter to Naomi Mitchison in 1955, Tolkien said, "I do think of the dwarves like Jews, at once native and alien in their habitations, speaking the languages of the country, but with an accent due to their own private tongue." Also, in The Hobbit, the central drive of the story is the dwarves attempting to reclaim their homeland. I think that one's a pretty straightforward read for 1937. So if Tolkien thought of dwarves as being like the Jews, what did Tolkien think of the dwarves? In Chapter 12 of The Hobbit, the narrator informs the reader of the following.
Dwarves are not heroes, but calculating folk with a great idea of the value of money. Some are tricky and treacherous and pretty bad lots. Some are not, but are decent enough people like Thorin and company, if you don't expect too much.
Wow, yikes, that's pretty condescending. Or how about the Semiticness of the Dwarven language? In a response to the editor of The Observer, Tolkien acknowledged there is some Scandinavian influences with Dwarven names, but he says, these dwarves are not quite the dwarves of better-known lore. They have been given Scandinavian names, it is true, but that is an editorial concession. Too many names in the tongues proper to the period might have been alarming. Dwarvish was both complicated and cacophonous. Even early Elvish philologists avoided it, and the dwarves were obliged to use other languages except for entirely private conversations. Imagine calling anyone's language cacophonous. Then there's the dwarves' obsession with gold in The Hobbit. Their greed leads them towards injustice in favor of hoarding their own wealth. In Rebecca Brackman's 2010 paper, Dwarves Are Not Heroes, Anti-Semitism and the Dwarves in J.R.R. Tolkien's Writing, Brackman writes, by far, though, the dwarves' dominant psychological attribute in The Hobbit is their love of gold, which echoes the widespread anti-Semitic belief that Jews are greedy. This remains a consistent thread of the book, starting from the song the dwarves sing in Chapter 1.
To find all
She later goes on to state, and this is a long quotation, but bear with me, indeed, the Hobbit's chief crisis comes when the dwarves refuse to grant any of the treasure to Bard, the slayer of Smaug, not even for the relief of the destroyed lake town. When the request is made, the dwarves have spent 2 days under the mountain enjoying their treasure.
They spoke aloud and cried out to one another, as they lifted old treasures from the mound or from the wall and held them in the light, caressing and fingering them.
Savoring the physical interaction between them and the treasure as Thorin had done in the book's first chapter. The gold has had an immediate effect on their characters.
When the heart of a dwarf, even the most respectable, is weakened by gold and by jewels, he grows suddenly bold, and he may become fiercer.
Bilbo expects that Thorin would at once admit what justice was in Bard's request. Thorin's response not only denying the claim of Girion's descendants to their portion of the treasure, but refusing compassionate aid to the people who helped him when he was in need, shows the limitations of his character. Although some of Thorin's irrational behavior could perhaps stem from a curse put on the gold by the dragon, as a similar curse is in Beowulf, one of Tolkien's unconscious inspirations for The Hobbit, the Hobbit Bilbo is not affected by this infusion of draconitas, and cannot understand Thorin's injustice.
But also, Bilbo did not reckon with the power that gold has upon which a dragon has long brooded, nor with dwarvish hearts. Long hours in the past days Thorin has spent in the treasury, and the lust of it was heavy on him. Though he had hunted chiefly for the Arkenstone, yet he had an eye for many another wonderful thing that was lying there, about which were wound old memories of the labours and sorrows of his race.
The race of dwarves intertwines their very identity with their artifacts, in gold, gems, and the treasures they construct out of them. Certainly, the dwarves are not the only characters to be influenced by the dragon's gold. The Master of Laketown also succumbs, but they are the only one for whom doing so seems to be a matter of their racial identity, their dwarvish hearts. As Mieville states in that earlier interview, racism is true in Tolkien's world, and so in The Hobbit, greed is inherent to the very being of all dwarves. Something that the abysmal Hobbit films actually double down on by making Thorin's gold sickness actual text, and something only a dwarf seems to experience.
Dragon sickness.
It sent his grandfather mad.
I will not part with a single coin.
There's other strange one-off instances of anti-Semitism, like in a letter to his son Christopher, where Tolkien gleefully recounts his conversations with South African poet Roy Campbell. I wish I could remember half of his picaresque stories about poets and musicians, etc. The one I enjoyed the most was the tale of the greasy Epstein, the sculptor, and how he fought him and put him in a hospital for a week. The Epstein in question was the artist Jacob Epstein, and yes, Jacob Epstein was Jewish. He favored modernist sculpture work, and his critics often were anti-Semitic towards him. Tolkien gleefully enjoying a story of a Jewish man being put in a hospital is not exactly chill behavior. Check out Jacob Gellar's excellent video, Who's Afraid of Modern Art, if you want a better understanding of that type of phenomenon towards a Jewish artist. But at this point, some of you may be going, Lady Knight the Brave, Tolkien hated the Nazis, he can't be anti-Semitic. It's true, Tolkien despised the Nazis. As previously mentioned, he was deeply offended by a letter from his German publishers asking him to confirm his Aryan status. He stated that he had many Jewish friends and was upset by the notion that anyone could believe he subscribed to their unscientific race doctrine and lunatic laws. I am not of Aryan extraction, that is, Indo-Iranian. As far as I am aware, none of my ancestors spoke Hindustani, Persian, or any related dialects. But if I am to understand that you are inquiring whether I am of Jewish origin, I can only reply that I regret that I appear to have no ancestors of that gifted people. He once called Hitler a vulgar and ignorant little cad, which is very funny to me personally. Unfortunately, it's very possible to believe a bunch of hideous stereotypes about a people while still disagreeing with a genocide on them. People are complex like that. But also, it appears Tolkien may have looked at the events of World War II as they occurred and went, whoops. It's quite possible that the near total extinction of a people caused him to re-examine some things. He became friends with Jewish historian Cecil Roth at some point and describes the man as the learned Jew historian, charming, and full of gentleness. Much of Tolkien's anti-Semitism reads as a sort of paternalistic condescension that is common from a well-meaning majority towards a minority. But again, he may have felt the need to walk some of that back because in The Lord of the Rings, Gimli is very much a hero.
Let them come. There is one dwarf yet in Moria who still draws breath.
He's valiant, loyal, and fights well enough to compete with the elf Legolas at Helm's Deep. He falls in love with Galadriel, who honors his affection with a gift of 3 locks of her golden hair, and he says her beauty is greater than all the jewels in the earth. And the text goes further to refute the previous claims of dwarves valuing gold above all else in passages such as this one, after the events of Helm's Deep, as the gang rides towards Isengard, where Gimli extols the virtues of the glittering caves to Legolas at great length. He describes gems and crystals and pools like starlight, and after enough of this, Legolas replies that they shouldn't tell other dwarves of it, in case they come to extract all that made it beautiful and ruin it in the process.
No, you do not understand, said Gimli. No dwarf could be unmoved by such loveliness. None of Durin's race would mine those caves for stones or ore, not if diamonds and gold could be got there. Do you cut down groves of blossoming trees in the springtime for firewood? We would tend these glades of flowering stone, not quarry them.
This shows us that the dwarves of The Lord of the Rings, unlike those of The Hobbit, can appreciate beauty over pure monetary gains. Brackman's paper, which I will link in the info and recommend reading in full, concludes thusly. The dwarves in The Hobbit are not the same as they are in The Lord of the Rings, and critics who have avoided a full assessment of Tolkien's use of anti-Semitic tropes in The Hobbit have missed some pointed alterations in the dwarvish characters between the earlier books and the later writings. This doesn't erase what he had already written. Simply trying to change negative traits to positive ones still subscribes to claims for racial identity, and I think readers and critics do need to acknowledge that he could be and was influenced by such aspects of English culture as anti-Semitism. To observe this is not necessarily to adopt the mode of gotcha criticism, as Glenn Love refers to it in an essay on eco-criticism, dragging past writers to the dock for lack of modern sensibilities. Rather, it is to observe that such ways of thinking, or the writer's diversion from them, may be worth examining. Instead of insisting that Tolkien is worthy of literary study but resisting analysis that presents problems for the reader, critics should allow themselves, and be allowed by their own readers, to examine his books with the same approaches that they use for other texts, noticing changes, gaps, alterations, and biases in Tolkien's texts. After all, in the case of the dwarves in The Hobbit, he seems to have been perfectly willing to perform such examinations himself. The reason it's valuable to examine the flaws in Tolkien's work is because his work is so seminal. So much modern fantasy is either directly influenced by it or written in response to it, and it's very possible for authors to unwittingly recreate many of these flaws if they go unexamined. These stories are deeply colonialist and frequently racist, and the movies just recreate many of these flaws wholesale. The other big issue that I haven't seen discussed a lot, which presents in the books and the films fairly equally, is Tolkien's ableism and saneism. Evil in Middle-earth is often ugly, disabled, and mentally ill. The books are always describing goblins and orcs and such as ugly, crook-legged, malformed, and so on. The saneism is particularly apparent with Denethor and Gollum. Now, here's a tricky bit with Denethor, and I'm asking people who never read the books to please sound off in the comments here. When you watched the films, did you understand Denethor was messed up because of the Palantir? The extended edition has a scene with the Palantir at Gondor, and Denethor says ominously,
"Do you think the eyes of the White Tar are blind? I have seen more than you know."
But the movie never says the Palantir messed him up, so you could assume Denethor is just a horrible father who is also mentally ill. I have no perspective on this because by the time Return of the King came out, I had read the books and just put that together myself. I only realized while working on this video that the movies never state that explicitly, but my friend Aronok put it together. I'm curious how many people understood that from the films alone. But in the books, it's the Palantir that has caused Denethor's madness. The Palantir corrupts through the will of Sauron, much in the way that the ring corrupts Gollum and to a lesser extent Boromir. In The Lord of the Rings, evil can make you insane, and also evil. Remember Tolkien describing Hitler's lunatic laws? Evil does not make you insane, and insanity does not make you evil, and acting like these two things are interchangeable allows us to villainize the mentally ill far too easily. And Gollum is the messiest of them all. The behind the scenes of the films frequently call him and his scenes schizoid or schizophrenic, although in reality Gollum is just one of the most recognizable and recognizably flawed portrayals of DID, or dissociative identity disorder. This used to be known as multiple personality disorder, but that term is no longer accepted by the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. The identities or personas that make up a plural person are often called alters or headmates. Although the specifics can vary from person to person, not every plural person has DID or OSDD, it's complicated. My friends who have DID also want me to highlight that no individual alter is the primary or original one. They are all just occupants of the same plural system, and I can tell you talking to these friends doesn't look like this.
Master's my friend. You don't have any friends. Nobody likes you. Not listening. Not listening.
It more often looks like us having a conversation, which is occasionally interrupted by them telling me who I'm talking to, since who is fronting can shift so subtly that I don't always notice when they've swapped. In the books, Gollum's eyes actually change color between a pale light and a green light as he alternates between Gollum and Smeagol, something the movies avoided probably because it seemed even more ridiculous. The most generous reading one can make of Gollum as portrayed in the film is that both alters, Smeagol and Gollum, are in their own ways just as sly, manipulative, and murderous. The evil alter trope is a very old and pernicious trope in media when it comes to portraying people with DID. Even Moon Knight, which according to my friends is the best DID rep they've yet seen in film or TV, still also does the evil murderous alter trope with the final scene introducing Jake Lockley. Gollum in particular has in many ways added and worsened people's understanding of mental illness throughout the years, and yeah, I liked seeing Gollum say fuck on the MTV Movie Awards.
And Peter Jackson, my precious, who do you think you are, you f***ing hack? Shame on you, go f*** yourself.
I adore this little freak, but he comes with a lot of baggage, and they're talking about making a Gollum movie now? A movie just about a mentally ill creature being hunted and tortured by the elves, the orcs, Aragorn, and Gandalf? For why? Anyway, let's talk about some fun behind-the-scenes shit.
And scene. And scene.
So I want to have fun with this section, since the making of these films basically is the reason I got interested in filmmaking, but there are some less fun bits I would like to mention up top. The first of which is just a lot of people worked on these movies, but when you look at IMDb, there's a lot of below-the-line work that is apparently uncredited. A couple of these are like people who are in the credits for other stuff, but a lot of them are just people who did work that went uncredited. Same goes for a bunch of background actors. Some of them are cameos or family and friends, but I doubt they all are, which is something that gives me pause. I don't care if the credits of these movies were 20 minutes on the extended editions. I think every person who did work to make these incredible films deserves to have their moment with their names on the screen. It's stuff like that which feels like a precursor to the fuckery that would play out when Jackson made the Hobbit films and did a lot of union busting from the sounds of it. I have a friend who worked with some New Zealand crew guys, and she said New Zealanders basically hate Peter Jackson these days for what he did to the New Zealand film industry. Also, recently Cate Blanchett stated in an article that she was never paid for playing Galadriel in The Lord of the Rings. She was just given a set of elf ears as a memento and free food, which, given the massive amount of money the films made, that's ridiculous. And then there's Stuart Townsend, the original actor who was cast to play Aragorn before he was recast abruptly. The behind the scenes even tell the story a bit.
We had a hiccup in the casting process because another actor had been cast in the role of Aragorn, and we just came to a realization that we had cast the role a little too young.
What they don't say is that Townsend was there in New Zealand rehearsing and training to be in the films for 2 months and was never paid. While I do think Viggo was the right choice, and the one image that may be of Townsend's Aragorn, I couldn't reliably source that, but the image, it's not promising to me. But it still sucks that his experience with the film was so awful. Other cast members were apparently quite shaken by Townsend's sudden departure. Apparently some of the cast, like Orlando Bloom, still keep in touch with him, which is sweet. And then there are these strange, possibly predictive moments in the behind the scenes, like this moment in the Two Towers commentary when Jackson, talking about the creation of this one-shot during Helm's Deep, starts excitedly discussing the possibilities of CGI for filmmakers.
You know, even the biggest battle scenes in movies to date have been with 4,000 or 5,000 extras, but because you have this, these computers and all these little CG soldiers, there's no problem putting, 10,000, 20,000 soldiers on screen.
And then his own wife asks,
do you think there comes a point when it defeats itself? When they have all these thousands of CG people flocking around?
Well, so long as it's telling a story.
And the answer to her question is yes. It's the Hobbit movies. Like, it's funny at times, the way the behind the scenes discusses Peter last minute dumping a bunch of shots on the special effects team.
The good news was that no horses were harmed during this scene. The bad news is that a lot of animators were.
And truly, Randall William Cook, an animation supervisor, was seeing into the future with this bit.
What's challenging about Peter is his dumb ideas.
In this clip, he's talking about Legolas jumping onto the cave troll in the Moria sequence, and that's pretty grounded compared to the Mumakil sequence in Return of the King, which I still like, by the way, and that was still more grounded than the Legolas stunts in The Hobbit. I just find it fascinating how it was clearly the back and forth between all the creative teams that made this final product work. All the various teams checking Jackson's ideas and bouncing them back and forth until they made something good. Whether it was down to the crunched production schedule on The Hobbit or Jackson just being too high on his own supply, I would guess that happened much less on those films. So with that out of the way...
You see that, how he kicked that helmet there?
Yeah.
He broke his toe doing that.
Yeah, I think I saw that online.
Well, I told you too, just now. You see how the hobbits are small? They're just like regular guys. They made them small. I think it's called perspective. It's a camera trick.
In case you were wondering, why yes I am and have been that person for years. I have a distinct memory of staying late at summer camp one day with another girl who was waiting to be picked up, and we just sat on the swings for well over an hour while I regaled her with every stupid factoid I could think of from The Lord of the Rings. Truly, it was a harbinger of things to come on this very channel. I've rewatched the cast commentary so many times I can recite bits from them, like this bit about Tig.
You can't Tig on a Tog, you
tag on a tig.
Same goes for the behind the scenes, where bits like Elijah Wood describing Viggo Mortensen's intensity during fight scenes live rent-free in my brain.
You can see the wildness in his eyes. He goes slightly mental. Something kind of clicks.
In fact, I'm just going to play you some of my favorite behind-the-scenes bits that I can't fit into the rest of the video.
Give this crazy, squealing orc, a character that said, "Here I am, I'm a freak, and I'm here to kill you."
When a set dies, it goes to set heaven.
Welcome to the bubble. This has been our home for what, the last year?
And the hostage.
Oh, and the hostage, yes, we can't forget the hostage. He still hasn't coughed up his secrets.
So it looks like there's a little bit of activity happening in the buildings. So, and mad to you too.
I think I've lost my mojo, baby. Yeah.
It's like the world's largest condom, ribbed for her pleasure.
This clip requires some context, but I guess this was the sort of on-set experience of the Nazgul before they added in those cool screams later. And of course, those screams were made partially using Fran Walsh's blood-curdling shriek.
And she stood there and she kind of took a deep breath in.
And did you ever wonder how they made them so small?
The thing, again, that everybody talks about is how did you get these guys to be, so small?
Somebody tell me how I got so small!
Well, there were loads of tricks used to make the Hobbits and Gimli look small. They had scale doubles, little people who would play them in wide shots, often with masks of the actors' faces to cover their actual faces.
The years of experience found on Kieran's face. And later you'll be able to see him wearing all of our faces.
Kieran Shaw played Frodo, Boja B.K. Kannada played Sam, a kid named Martin Lennison Gray played Merry, Prafafan Fawn Chancetor played Pippin, and Brett Beatty played Gimli. I think Beatty is probably the one you see the most because of all the latex and makeup involved to create Gimli. So he looks better up close than the Hobbit scale doubles often do. All the scale doubles, I think, at times did some stunt work. Brett Beatty, being a martial artist, probably did the most, but Fawn, Pippin's scale double, was interested in stunt work, and I think my favorite trick with the scale doubles involves this little stunt in Return of the King, where Denethor drags Pippin and throws him out this door. For this, he dragged Fawn, and she would get thrown and roll into Billy Boyd, who was simply lying on the ground out of frame, and so when she hit against Boyd, he would pop up in the frame, and the effect is practically seamless. But they also had some big people who would do scenes to make the regular actors look small. One actor, referred to as Tall Paul in the behind the scenes, did a lot of work doubling as Gandalf with Billy Boyd. They also had big rigs, which look ridiculous in a close-up, but worked excellently in the background of shots like this one. It's basically a suit with animatronic hands and an actor on stilts working the thing. Or sometimes they just built sets and props at two different scales to make one person look small and the other person look big.
Well, we're done with the small set, so it's time to shift to the big set, all right, guys?
Some stuff was simply done by filming certain actors on blue screen and compositing them into shots looking bigger or smaller as needed. And my favorite is the use of forced perspective, where bits of set and props were built specially so two actors could do a scene together, with the actors who need to look small just farther back from the camera, and carefully placed bits of set dressing hide the fact that this table or this wagon look weird as hell from the wrong angle. Elijah Wood and Ian McKellen had bunches of scenes together in Fellowship where they had to perform without actually making eye contact in order to sell the effect.
From the hand of Sauron himself. No, don't look at me. Sauron himself.
Oh, and the models they built on these films? Rather than calling them miniatures, they coined the term bigatures because some of these models could fill warehouses. They're beautiful and intricate, and I'm pretty sure Weta is still the best in the business at this. I'm pretty sure they did some model work for Blade Runner 2049. I love models. These are gorgeous to look at. One thing I admire about The Lord of the Rings is that nothing was ruled out. Matte paintings and models and little people and big people, these are all tools used judiciously along with the many advancements made in CGI. Motion capture is something that was more or less invented, or at the very least advanced significantly through the process of creating Gollum. For most of the films, Andy Serkis would perform on set in that ridiculous suit to provide the actors something to play off of, and then he would have to do it all again, alone in a studio. By the end of Return of the King, they began filming motion capture all at once on the set. They also tried doing takes where the actors would basically mime without Andy Serkis there in order to make it easier to place a CGI Gollum in the shot, but in the end, the shots they filmed with Andy were always better, and so CGI artists had to painstakingly paint out Serkis frame by frame before placing Gollum into the scene. Oh, and one time, Andy Serkis accidentally ripped Sean Astin's wig off during the scene where they almost ran through the Black Gates. Sean Astin was having a bad day and stormed off in a tizzy, and just Elijah Wood's face here? Another cool effect was the creation of the Ents in Two Towers in Return of the King. Most of them are CGI creations, and the ones that aren't are still enhanced with CGI, but there was an elaborate animatronic of Treebeard that was built for Billy and Dom to act with, and apparently working with the animatronic was an experience. There were these bicycle seats in his hands for the boys to sit on, and they were very uncomfortable.
But it also really crushes your family jewels, as it were.
But also, while they filmed, there were fans blowing, somebody was off camera shouting directions at the puppeteers working all the pieces of the animatronic, and then John Rhys-Davies was sat in a chair calling out Treebeard's lines over the din. And according to Billy Boyd, this is what it was like.
And then we have to turn and say, so why are there no Entwives left? Left!
Oh, and if you haven't seen the mock-up they put together for the destruction of Isengard sequence, let me tell you, it is magical. Oh, and Viggo Mortensen was a massive prankster on set. He loved to mess with Sean Bean, and then on the later films, Bernard Hill. And I know I mentioned him and the stunt team always headbutting each other, but one time he convinced this one stuntman, Sala Baker, to headbutt Orlando Bloom at a bar.
I described and it went whack. White light. But I think he enjoyed it.
And at the end of the filming, the stunt team performed a haka in honor of Viggo Mortensen, which is really fucking sweet. Also, Viggo was, and probably still is, a horse girl to his very core. I mentioned him working with the horse who played Brigo for the stunt. The horse's name was Uraeus, by the way, and Viggo would sleep in the barn with Uraeus to get the horse really comfortable with him. He also bonded with fellow horse girl Jane Abbott, who was Liv Tyler's riding double for the big Nazgul chase in Fellowship of the Ring. Abbott really bonded with the horse Florian, who she rode for that sequence, and she said she wished she could buy him, but she couldn't afford him, so Viggo bought Florian for Abbott. And as I am also a horse girl, I eat this shit up with a ladle. Oh my god. I was gonna rant about Howard Shore here, but subscribe to Nebula, I guess. So, back to general behind-the-scenes rantings. Let's see. On the list of injuries for The Lord of the Rings, Sean Astin accidentally stepped on some glass in this scene.
Of course you are! And I'm coming with you!
And that somehow led to this unhinged exchange.
A lot of blood. Master Frodo can play with my clots anytime he wants to.
Of course, Viggo famously broke 2 of his toes here, which happened to coincide with Orlando Bloom's cracked rib and Gimli's scale double Brett Beatty having a dislocated knee. And this was the time in the schedule when they filmed all the running scenes in Two Towers, when Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli look for Merry and Pippin. As they tell it, Viggo and Orlando were often racing each other, and for the helicopter shots directed by Barry Osborne, they mainly communicated via walkie-talkie like this, according to Mortensen.
And then they'd say, okay, run, don't fall down.
Also, as well as the infamous breaking of 2 of his toes, Viggo chipped a tooth during the Helm's Deep filming and tried to just glue it back in and keep going. Helm's Deep was 3 months of night shoots, and according to everybody who worked on it, it was hell. They handed out shirts to everyone who worked on it that said, "I survived Helm's Deep." At one point, just to pass the time, the stunties playing the orcs performed a haka, which ended up being the inspiration for the sequence before Helm's Deep where the orcs are banging their spears and shouting. And apparently they would egg on the elf actors, who occasionally weren't quite ferocious enough during the battle sequences.
We had a few modern day gestures creep into the program there, and we had to cut.
Oh, and Orlando Bloom did the shield boarding stunt himself. I mean, he was on strings, but still. Now that cool flip he does during the warg fight onto his horse was an entirely digital effect because they forgot or were unable to film Orlando Bloom getting on his horse on that day due to his cracked rib. Let's see, what else is there? Oh, for this scene, in order to get the sound of the many voices chanting black speech, Peter Jackson went to a cricket game and put the phonetically spelled out black speech on the screens and asked an apparently very drunk and rowdy cricket audience to yell that shit out. 10 out of 10, immaculate. Oh, and let's not forget the time that Liv Tyler correctly and justifiably put her foot down when they tried to film her reuniting with Aragorn at the coronation scene, and they wanted her to do it with Aragorn's double.
And I completely had a heart attack. I was like, what do you mean? It's my last moment in the movie. It's so important. I can't kiss his double. So they brought Viggo back, thank God, and I got to kiss Viggo.
She was right and correct and so valid for that. Other funny coronation bits include this shot where Aragorn said,
"You bow to no one."
And for the Hobbits filming their angle on blue screen, Viggo Mortensen was off camera with a silly little crown that kept getting more and more ridiculous as the takes went on.
What kind of bowing at him good?
Oh, and check out this shot where Viggo's bow hits the camera. Mwah! Chef's kiss. I just love the irreverence of some of the folk working on this because to them it was just their job for like 3 or 4 years. Speaking of that, here's some more behind the scenes clips I need you to see.
Is everybody keen on a good hour and a half, maybe 2 hours overtime? I have a life!
On top of that, we also have to make it out of a form of cookie dough in order to get it to crumble correctly. So that is one big biscuit. A few things have changed since last time we talked.
Hello, John. Hello. Speak up. Oh, it's not. Of course, I haven't got the end off. It's silly. Are you there?
This is what we call, in the stunt department, a brohan. I'm already trying to be a Rohan, eh?
Mike Hopkins, the supervising sound editor, is hilarious in the commentaries.
And here we have Elrond, one of the last elves in the Middle Earth. And the reason being, he's such a downer these days, they wouldn't have him on the f***ing boat. They said, "No, you're not coming to the Undying Land with us, you f***ing moaning bastard. Give that man a Valium, some Prozac for f***ing sake." We actually played Sauron talking directly to Aragorn. You know, do we have black speech for "you're a worthless sack of shit"? It'll never amount to anything.
Or what about the entire debate that happened over this line?
Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys.
For an Uruk-hai to say that would suggest he lives in a society where A, he has a menu, and B, that menu is selective enough to have food taken off it and put back on again.
So, Christian, why do Uruks have belly buttons?
Oh, and they had to film the Grey Haven scene like 3 times. Once because Sean Astin forgot to put his waistcoat back on after lunch, and then once again because the negatives were all out of focus.
And I remember the 3 other hobbits looked at me like, "We will kill you, you jerk."
Oh, and this scene from Return of the King?
I'm sorry, Sam,
but he's a liar.
Elijah Wood and Sean Astin filmed their halves of the scene about a year apart, with Sean Astin's half being filmed before Andy Serkis had even been cast. The pair of them, along with Andy Serkis, spent a lot of the latter 2 films on a squash court with polystyrene rocks.
We'd get to set, and he'd look at me, and he'd go, "Here we are again." And another batch of rocks.
Oh, and did you know an explosive went off nearby during the filming of this scene?
It's the ring.
Apparently they were filming near a New Zealand military base that was doing something.
I do. It's the ring. It's the ring.
Oh, and did you know that when earlier Gollum models were greener, animators used Kermit as a placeholder model?
Early on, when he was still Green Gollum and they needed somebody to stand in, for some reason, Kermit became a sort of AirSats de facto stand-in.
And did you know nobody had a clue what to do for Gandalf's resurrection sequence? According to several commentaries, the script and the edit had notes like death, birth, cosmic weird, or surreal cosmic shit. Also, here's some more clips from the behind the scenes that I love.
There's no category for this, so we don't know where to put it.
I am free!
Hi, as I go over my lines in embarrassment.
Hi. Came out. What do you think? What good is this? What's this? That's typical elf work.
Samwise Gamgee, have you been eavesdropping?
I haven't been dropping no eaves, sir. Honest, I just wanted to come in and try and get a bit of a close-up. I mean, you had one and Frodo had one and I've been in nothing but group shots so far.
No. It's
too late. Special effects in this movie and I just wanted to be a part of it now.
There's kind of a horse skin wrapped around it, and I had to do this for 5 days. And look scared.
What I'm forever astounded by, though, is the utter sincerity of the people who worked on this. Everybody seemed to care so much, and they seemed to really bond while making these films.
What you have achieved is sheer magic. All of you. You are the greatest crew I've ever known.
I'm astonished when I come back in year 4 now that I still find the same passion and love for what we do. Because I'll tell you what, you don't find it in LA.
The bit that always makes me cry is the final shot that was filmed for the trilogy. It's this one shot of Frodo and Bag End as he finishes writing The Lord of the Rings.
There's room for a little more.
And they filmed take after take because Jackson just didn't want it to be over. When he finally called that they had got it, he and Elijah Wood hugged and cried.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been so amazing, Peter.
I know there were issues, even during the making of this trilogy, but the affection between everyone feels so genuine, it still gets me to this day. I hope one day I get to work on something where people care about the project and each other this much. Oh, and did you know Bill the Pony was frequently 2 people in a horse costume? I will be clear for the Tolkien aficionados. I read The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy and nothing else. I tried to read the Silmarillion once, but I struggled to get through actual history books. I have never had the attention span to read a fantasy world's history textbook. I haven't read any of Tolkien's other stories or that Beowulf translation. I just read those 4 books. And loved them, by the way. The Hobbit was probably my least favorite just because I was coming to it directly from this film trilogy and it's the farthest from them in tone. But I did love the books. I'm still deeply fond of them. They have a beautiful lyricism, and I think my love of poetry originates in many ways with reading these books. That said, they are in many ways a different beast from the films because Tolkien wasn't too terribly concerned with things like pacing, at least in the more modern sense. The stories move at a very deliberate pace, at times with seemingly lower stakes. The language and characterization is sometimes very arch. The films often heightened conflicts or externalized them and picked up the pace, as well as making some of the language a bit more approachable. There are still things I miss from the books, like the entire, very charming reuniting scene that Merry and Pippin have with Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli in the Two Towers.
You rascals! You woolly-footed and wool-pated truants! A fine hunt you have led us! 200 leagues through fen and forest, battle and death to rescue you, and here we find you feasting and idling and smoking! Smoking! Where did you come by the weed, you villains? Hammer and tongs! I am so torn between rage and joy that if I do not burst, it will be a marvel! You speak for me, Gimli, laughed Legolas. Though I would sooner learn how they came by the wine.
They just hang out and tell stories about what they've been up to. It's really nice. The scene of Pippin finding Merry after Pelennor Fields hits harder for me in the book. I still think about Merry asking, "Are you going to bury me?" Also in the book, we see Pippin take Merry to the Houses of Healing. I'm sorry, movie Pippin, but a blanket is not going to cut it. And I loved all the stuff with Eowyn and Faramir in the Houses of Healing. But these were hard books to adapt, and the choices they made, I think, were mostly for the better. I don't miss Tom Bombadil. I think he's a character that works on the page and not on screen. He's yet another character who exists outside the conflict who is too OP to participate, like the Ents and the Eagles. And while the Scouring of the Shire did have some interesting themes, as one Tumblr user, ROTK, put it, and I'm sorry for butchering their name, I'm about to truncate their very good post as well, in the books, they return from the war only to see that the war has not left their home untouched. In contrast, in the Jackson films, they return to a Shire shockingly untouched by the horrors of war. After having been bowed to by kings, dwarves, elves, and men alike at the coronation in Gondor, their only acknowledgement upon returning home is a skeptical headshake from an older hobbit. Which is the deeper hurt? To come to your home and find it irrevocably changed, despite all you did to keep it untouched and the same, or to return home, but no longer feeling at home, because it is only you that is irrevocably changed. Which, yeah, damn. The bittersweetness of that moment in the tavern where they're all just looking at each other hits so hard. If we're talking about actual flaws with the films, the common complaint that Return of the King has too many endings is not entirely unfounded. My big issue comes with the big fade to black when Frodo and Sam are at the end of all things. It makes you think the movie is ending, and when it doesn't, you are suddenly aware of how long you've been sitting there and how much longer you have to go. The movie does need all those endings, and frankly, I want to see the extra epilogue footage they had shot for all the characters. I'm hoping it includes Gimli and Legolas going on their post-fellowship boys trip to a bunch of forests and caves from the appendices. But the ending does go on for a bit, and a few of those fades are, well, if not necessary, then understandable. I don't know how I would transition from the Grey Havens either. But every one of them is quite long, and for that first one, you feel every second of it. I think without the dissolves, this complaint might be a little less of a thing. It's the ending of an entire trilogy. I will not complain about wrapping up 30 character arcs. One struggle across the trilogy that I do feel eventually becomes a problem is Arwen. She's Aragorn's love interest, and her entire plotline is only in the appendices. My girl does not have lines in the actual books until the wrap-up of Return of the King. So putting her in the movies more makes sense. Giving Glorfindel's bit to Arwen in Fellowship is good. In Two Towers, we basically get a rundown of the stuff from the appendices. It's very sad, and I like it. Then we get to Return of the King, and you can feel the filmmakers wanting to include her before her big kiss with Aragorn at the end. And so we get this weird bit where she has a vision of her son on the way to the Grey Havens, and I don't know why it's that surprising that if she and Aragorn get married and the war with Sauron goes well, they might have a kid. So this scene...
You saw there was a child. You saw my son.
Was always a bit weird to me. But then we have this thing where Sauron's grasp on the world is for some reason affecting Arwen's immortality specifically.
Arwen is dying. She will not long survive the evil that now spreads from Mordor.
They try to justify this a lot in the commentaries, but honestly, I would have rather had another flashback of the two of them like the shit we had in Two Towers. Maybe just take that scene from Two Towers and put it in Return of the King. It exists kind of divorced from the plot anyway.
This is a dream. Then it is a good dream.
And in the extendeds, the Arwen maybe dying thing leads to this bit where Aragorn and Sauron have a dick measuring contest via Denethor's Palantir, and Sauron's like, ha ha ha, your girlfriend might die. And this freaks out Aragorn, and it breaks the Evenstar pendant. To be clear, I like that scene, but if we needed to reinforce the stakes for Aragorn, why not, have Sauron show him his friends dying? In Return of the King, Gandalf is the one who gets this anxiety about Frodo's fate. But what if that was Aragorn who needed to be reassured that he didn't send Frodo to his death here?
Run! Run!
And Gandalf had to comfort him a little, making this line
for Frodo
hit even harder because we were worried about him. Just to be clear, I think Gandalf's stuff is really emotionally affecting, but if the writers were trying to solve this with a bit of adaptational flourish, that's where I would put it. But yeah, that's really the only big flaw I can find in the entire 9 hours, or really more like 12 if you're watching the extendeds. I could talk about this hilarious bit of dissolves and overlays when Frodo is arriving at Rivendell, all messed up from the Nazgul. It is funny, and it is wild, but it's also kind of charming. I could talk about how the horn of the Hornburg at Helm's Deep does sound like a fart, but honestly, when the music's going and everything is so hyped, the flatulent horn barely even registers as anything other than sick as hell.
Now for wrath, now for ruin, and the Red Dawn!
Honestly, a lot of the adaptational choices they made, which I often hear criticized, I think, are good actually. Faramir in the books is just a nice guy who, after some initial suspicion, is just nice and never gets tempted by the ring or is cruel to Gollum. But when you see the abuse he faces from his dad, I can see that making a person act out of pocket.
Chance for Faramir, Captain of Gondor, to show his quality.
Would you be normal if your dad talked about you like this?
Do not trouble me with Faramir. I know his uses and they are few.
And so when he's back to being his best self in Return of the King, it feels like he really learned something from Frodo and Sam.
Captain Faramir, you have shown your quality, sir. The very highest.
Movie and book Faramir break my goddamn heart, by the way.
You wish now that our places had been exchanged, that I had died and Boromir had lived.
Yes, I wish that.
Every version of Faramir hurts my feelings. Even when he's being a little turd in Osgiliath, I love him so much I want the world for him. And when him and Eowyn find each other in the Houses of Healing, two very broken people comfort each other and fall in love, and it's good. In the books, Pippin actually befriended this other fella, Baragond, in Gondor, and didn't really interact with Faramir that much, but the choice to have them be friends in this one scene is so sweet. I love them.
This was yours?
Yes, my father had it made for me.
Well, I'm taller than you were then.
And then there's the changes made to one Samwise Gamgee, which I've heard criticized a lot. In the book, Sam is also just kind of a nice guy, but also often he's treated a bit like he's just bumbling and oafish.
Up you come, Sam, my lad, said Frodo. Now take my hand. Save me, Mr. Frodo, gasped Sam. I'm drowned. I can't see your hand. Here it is. Don't pinch, lad. I won't let you go. Tread water and don't flounder or you'll upset the boat. There now. Get hold of the side and let me use the paddle. With a few strokes, Frodo brought the boat back to the bank and Sam was able to scramble out, wet as a water rat. Of all the confounded nuisances, you are the worst, Sam, he said. Oh, Mr. Frodo, that's hard, said Sam, shivering. That's hard, trying to go without me and all. If I hadn't guessed right, where would you be now? Safely on my way.
But even in the books, he is often overly cautious, and the movies make his caution a strength and a weakness on the journey. He is, in many ways, right to be wary of Gollum's motivations, but he also is part of the problem in his cruelty towards this creature. And by Return of the King, the strain of the journey gets to Sam to the point that when he starts lashing out against Gollum, it is scary. But it's also understandable that the stress of their journey, watching this ring turn his friend into a stranger, always being near death and starvation, it takes an understandable toll on him, and it manifests like this.
That's a filthy lie! Stop it!
Whether you think it's good or bad for him to act this way in response to Gollum, I do think it comes from an understandable place. In the books, the way they just sort of get separated long enough for Frodo to be poisoned by Shelob is, well, convenient. Although the image of Gollum stopping Sam from saving him is powerful. But I do like the drama that plays out in the film with Frodo sending Sam away. Sean Astin's performance here is utterly heartbreaking and an extra wrinkle that really adds to this section of the story for them, because now when Sam goes to save Frodo, we're also waiting for them to resolve their argument. I think it's good. I love the way the films often choose to externalize conflicts and further emphasize relationships beyond what existed in the original text. Like Legolas and Gimli counting kills was a gag in the Two Towers book, but the films keep it in Return of the King, leading to the very funny,
That still only counts as one!
Like, I once saw somebody critique this collapsing bridge sequence from Fellowship of the Ring. It's entirely new material, not in the book, but it's a sequence that highlights a lot of individual relationships as they navigate this obstacle. Legolas helps Gimli, although they bicker while they do it. Boromir carries Merry and Pippin across, and Aragorn and Frodo have to work together to get across the gap, and it's awesome. But also, it serves to remind us of a lot of important connections that will become more vital as the film progresses. Most of the adaptational difficulties that the theatrical editions suffer from, I do think are pretty much solved by the extended editions. Although the extendeds do come with some sequences that maybe didn't need to be there. The oops, all skulls bit of the Paths of the Dead in Return to the King does go on for quite a while, but I'll take that to get the sequences of Faramir and Eowyn in the Houses of Healing, or Pippin befriending Faramir at Gondor, which really helps the sequence when Pippin tries to save him from being burned alive, because in the theatrical version, he's just saving a dude who stared at him one time, because Pippin's a good dude like that. As an aside, apparently a much-debated element that was added for the films is that moth from the scene where Gandalf was captured at Isengard. The moth has its own wiki page and a controversy section. Incredible, 10 out of 10. I find it fascinating to think about how most of what gets lost from the theatrical versions to the extended cuts are character moments, and mostly ones that I really like and I think add to the story and fill out some stuff that was lost in the theatricals. Meanwhile, when they turned one book into 9 hours of Hobbit movies, instead of spending time trying to actually characterize their 13 dwarves, they just added a bunch of bullshit sequences and a studio-mandated love story that nobody wanted. That one dwarf with the hearing aid, I don't think he ever gets any other character traits other than has a hearing aid. Honestly, the Hobbit movies feel like all the worst ideas you hear mentioned in passing in the Lord of the Rings behind the scenes that they wisely decided to shelve because they didn't work. Like, at one point in Return of the King, Aragorn was going to sword fight with Sauron at the gates of Mordor. They cut that, which is good. Then they just had Galadriel, Elrond, and Saruman kind of do that bit in the third Hobbit movie. Wild. A thing I learned after watching the Hobbit films was that I did not in fact want a Lord of the Rings franchise. The phrase Lord of the Rings franchise makes me sad. I will not watch Rings of Power, or that animated Rohirrim flick, or that Gollum movie that Andy Serkis might direct at some point. I have 3 beloved films and everything else does not exist to me except in my nightmares. The only thing I've seen from Rings of Power is this one deeply unserious scene that was so bad I refused more than I already had refused to watch the show. But what I do find interesting are the tangential properties that probably are not considered part of the franchise in the modern sense. Other adaptations of The Lord of the Rings that do exist largely independently from the media conglomerate that Warner Brothers is milking for all of its worth. Now, this isn't a comprehensive list of all of them. This fella Suspect Green did watch all of them. If you want to hear about the weird Soviet adaptations or whatever, link to that is in the description. But I will talk about the ones that I did experience. The animated films are a curious artifact, largely because they happened sort of independently of each other. The production company Rankin and Bass, probably known best for The Last Unicorn and a lot of fairy tale and holiday-themed films, made the animated Hobbit film released in 1977. A year later, Ralph Bakshi, the creator of a lot of weird and horny stuff like Fritz the Cat and Cool World, released his Lord of the Rings film. The film combined The Fellowship and Two Towers into one 2-hour film, and truly, it is just a series of events. There isn't enough time to spend on emotional beats or really anything. Things just happen and then we move on very quickly to the next thing. Also, this film features a lot of rotoscoping, which leads to a lot of oddly fluid animation. Rotoscoping has often been used to an unsettling effect, but in this case, because they are trying to animate these cartoonish faces over their normally proportioned reference footage, it's extra weird. I find it funny that although they went through the trouble of animating small hobbits, Gimli is just a regular-sized dude. I also love this bit where clearly their reference footage of Aragorn had the guy falling down, and they just animated the man falling down. Also, yeah, Aragorn looks kind of indigenous, which maybe makes Gondor feel like a landback situation. I have no idea if that was Bakshi's intention. Also, probably to save money, Bakshi just filmed some stuff in live action and then developed the film in this particular way, so it looks kind of but not really animated. And it must be said, Bakshi's Lord of the Rings was an inspiration for Peter Jackson. Some of the Nazgul scenes in particular are nearly shot-for-shot recreations with higher production value, so that's neat. Then in 1980, Rankin and Bass released their Return of the King, which a very cursory Google search says was always their plan, although now Warner Brothers has lumped them together as though this was an intentional thing. And boy, is this a film. It is of a piece with their Hobbit film, where, along with the pastoral animation and oddly wrinkly character designs, the tone is just baffling. Truly, shit just happens in these movies.
Adventures make one late for dinner.
Enough! I am Gandalf, and Gandalf means me!
And there are a lot of songs. Like, a lot of them. Or, well, there's like 5 songs, and some of them are repeated about 50 times. as an adaptational choice, having songs makes sense. In the books, the characters sing quite a lot, but going from the poetry of that to
where there's a whip, there's a way. Where there's a whip, there's a way.
Is an experience. I don't hate these movies, I just think the silliness of them works better in The Hobbit than in this climactic film where they chose to focus mainly on Frodo and Sam to the detriment of all other characters. Aragorn, the titular returning king, basically shows up in the final third of the film. Eowyn has her one scene against the Witch King, and that is it. Denethor gets to be weird with the Palantir and then die. Meanwhile, Legolas and Gimli are fully absent, as is Arwen, a wild decision on the part of the filmmakers. Also, they pronounce some stuff weird.
An ancient world of towered fortress cities. Cirith Ungol, Theoden, and the rescuing armies of Rohan, minus Tirith.
Don't mind me, I'm just subtracting my Tirith. Then there's the Lord of the Rings musical, which did come out after the films in 2007-ish, and to some degree was probably influenced by them and trafficking on recent interest in the material due to the films. But Sean McKenna and Matthew Warchus tried to squeeze the entire trilogy into one 3-hour show, which means they took some really wild swings, like basically combining Rohan and Gondor into just Gondor, but Denethor is kind of Theoden-like for reasons. But Galadriel has 3 solos. Honestly, if it were me, I would have combined Rivendell and Lothlorien and given Galadriel stuff to Arwen. I know Galadriel's a huge important character, but if you gotta make cuts. The show does still have its moments, and from the clips that can be found online, the original Toronto and London productions had an incredible maximalist aesthetic that is completely unhinged, and I love it. This is what Aragorn looks like. This is what Galadriel looked like. The music was done with several composers. The composer A.R. Rahman, who worked on Slumdog Millionaire, 127 Hours, and Elizabeth the Golden Age, the Finnish folk group Vartinia, and Christopher Nightingale, who worked on the Matilda musical. The collaboration leads to a very interesting musical soundscape. Some of it, particularly many of its action sequences, sound completely distinct from the films, and kind of awesome. Lastly, I have to talk to you about the radio show, which is coming from the same era of BBC adaptations as the very staid Shakespeare adaptations, and stylistically the delivery is much the same.
Yet ye had just the wit to play the part that I set in, for you have come, and that was all the purpose of my message. And here you will stay, Gandalf the Grey. For I am Saruman the Wise, Saruman of many colors.
I like white better.
But if you are looking for the most loyal adaptation, this is probably it. A few minor details get shifted, but overall it is probably the most accurate to the text. And also, rather adorably, has to communicate certain things entirely through its audio medium, leading to moments where they want you to know this Gwahir character is in fact a giant bird, so...
Gandalf!
Gwahir, Windlord, swiftest of all eagles. Why come you here?
I am sent to Orthanc with a message of import.
Incredible, I love it. I feel like these films often have a reputation for being kind of boring, because they're long and have too many endings and people say shit like this.
Until at last I threw down my enemy and smote his ruin upon the mountainside.
Which, yeah, the language is a bit arch. If you've seen my Shakespeare videos, you know that shouldn't stop you from enjoying cool shit. But the films actually made a lot of smart little edits in order to make the language a bit more approachable without losing the essence of the original material.
So all my plan is spoiled, said Frodo. It is no good trying to escape you, but I'm glad, Sam. I cannot tell you how glad. Come along. It is plain that we were meant to go together. We will go, and may the others find a safe road. Strider will look after them. I don't suppose we shall see them again. Yet we may, Mr. Frodo. We may, said Sam.
I hope the others find a safer road. Strider will look after them. I don't suppose we'll ever see them again. We may yet, Mr. Frodo. We may.
But the choice by the filmmakers to include as much of the lyricism and poetry as they could stuff in there is also excellent.
Where is the horse and the rider? Where is the horn that was blowing?
The finest rockets ever seen. They burst in stars of blue and green.
And a lot of it, which doesn't show up diegetically, is actually squeezed into the score. A lot of what is being chanted by those choirs in Elvish, Dwarvish, and Black speech is more of Tolkien's poetry, and I love it. Also, these films don't always get the credit they deserve for being really funny. A lot of the humor comes from Merry and Pippin.
What about breakfast?
You've already had it.
We've had one, yes. What about second breakfast?
This, my friend, is a pint. It comes in pints. I'm getting one.
Or Gimli.
There's plenty for the both of us. May the best of win.
Although I think Gandalf's dry wit is also a source of great joy.
I do not mention Frodo, the ring. And say nothing of Aragorn either. In fact, it's better if you don't speak at all about him too.
And also this particular laugh that he does. Also, nobody ever talks enough about the fact that Frodo's just doing the chicken dance in that one scene. I also love this bit from The Two Towers. It's a callback to the dwarf tossing gag from Fellowship with that bridge scene.
Nobody tosses a dwarf!
But the humor for me always comes in Gimli's immense self-respect, even when the world isn't really built for him. He will never lose faith in himself.
We dwarves are natural sprinters! Very dangerous over short distances!
So in Two Towers, they have to jump this distance, and Gimli's like, oh fuck.
I cannot jump the distance, you'll have to test me!
And the best part is, right before they go, he's just like,
don't tell the elf. Not a word.
And then they go back to kicking ass? It's awesome! Honestly, and this is pure headcanon here, but I feel like some of the goofier Gimli moments in the film trilogy are Gimli genuinely trying to cheer up his friends.
It's a little tight across the chest.
Like, I'm sure Gimli already had chainmail that fit him. I think he was just trying to lighten the mood. Even Legolas gets to be hilarious sometimes.
Shall I describe it to you? Or would you like me to find you a box?
Oh, and I love this bit, which is kind of buried in the sound mix. I only picked it up when I started watching the movies with subtitles on, but when Frodo puts out their fire on Weathertop, Pippin yells,
That's nice! Ash on my tomatoes!
And I really love what a little drama queen Gollum is.
Never! Smeagol wouldn't hurt a fly! Ah!
Also, the delivery on this line always gets me.
Miserable.
And of course, even more gags were hidden away in the extendeds for only the super nerds to discover.
He was twitching, cause he's got my axe embedded in his nervous system!
Legolas and Gimli's killing contest is from the books, and yeah, it's a bit wild, but it's also really funny.
Legolas! Two already!
I'm on 17!
Ah! I have no pointy arrow scoring me! Ah!
These movies always struggled to balance the idea of being anti-war while also wanting to show the war as being, well, rad as hell. I'm not sure they ever quite got the balance, but I do love the cool shit too much to be mad about it. So many parts of these films are just awesome. Like this bit with Aragorn taking a moment to center himself before fighting the Uruk-hai in Fellowship, or when he goes sicko mode in Moria, or when he sets some Nazgul on fire, or this shot of him in Two Towers, or this one from Helm's Deep. Or this one from Return of the King. Aragorn was really freaking awesome. It's no wonder the Hobbit movies had like 3 Aragorn types running around trying to capture that energy again. And of course, Legolas's stunts are awesome. I know Tolkien probably spun in his grave at the shield boarding, but I thought it was sick nasty, to quote a favorite podcast. Side note, go listen to the Kill James Bond podcast. And of course, let me take a minute to talk about my love, my perfect darling, Éowyn.
Women of this country learned long ago. Those without swords can still die upon them.
I love Éowyn. She's so sad and also so awesome. I'm grateful that we didn't take the time for Merry to be convinced of her disguise as Dernhelm in Return of the King. It's good in the book, but this is a long film and it would be just one more thing to deal with, so we just do this.
Ride with me, my lady.
But Éowyn spends so much of these movies sad and angry and constantly being held back by her well-meaning brother and uncle and even the kindly Aragorn.
Why can he not fight for those he loves? You do not command the others to stay. They fight beside you because they would not be parted from you. I can fight.
No!
She has to go behind everyone's back along with Merry in order to be at Pelennor Fields, and then it is only Éowyn who can defend her uncle with the sickest line in film history.
No man can kill me.
I am no man.
It's good! It's just good! And it's another example of adapting the essence of the text while making the language more approachable.
A sword rang as it was drawn. Do what you will, but I will hinder it if I may. Hinder me, thou fool. No living man may hinder me. Then Merry heard of all sounds in that hour the strangest. It seemed that Durnhelm laughed, and the clear voice was like the ring of steel. But no living man am I. You look upon a woman. Eowyn I am, Eamond's daughter. You stand between me and my lord and kin. Be gone if you be not deathless. For living or dark undead, I will smite you if you touch him.
I am no man.
It's so freaking cool. And Gandalf? Good lord, Gandalf gets to be iconic at least once per film. In Fellowship, he faces the Balrog and says the line,
"You shall not pass!"
In Two Towers, the scene where he frees Theoden from Saruman's curse is rad.
You have no power here, Gandalf the Grey.
And in Return of the King, he not only gets this awesome sequence outside of Gondor, he also just gets to whip ass a bit during the final battle, and I love it.
This is no place for a hobbit!
And oh my lordy, the speeches. Theoden and Aragorn both get banger speeches in Return of the King. I would be hard-pressed to pick a favorite, but both are carried by the performances of Viggo Mortensen and Bernard Hill.
Spears shall be shaken! Shields shall be splintered! A sword day! A red day! And the sun rises!
An hour of wolves and shattered shields when the age of men comes crashing down! But it is not this day!
Some scenes are simply carried by Howard Shore's score. I love the Ents attack on Isengard or the Fellowship racing through Moria, but without Shore pumping the most badass beats ever composed, I don't know if these would hit the same. And then there's the scenes that make me both want to punch the air and cry. Like the sequence at the end of Fellowship when Aragorn tells Legolas and Gimli the Fellowship remains as long as they stay true to each other and they will not abandon Merry and Pippin and...
That is handsome, Orc.
It's so good! Ah! So now let's talk about the experience of being a fan of The Lord of the Rings in the early 2000s. Being a Lord of the Rings fan in the early days of the internet was truly an experience. I believe classic Lord of the Rings fans called themselves Tolkienites. In the 2000s, they called themselves Ringers. I didn't call myself any of those things. I thought those were terrible names. I did actually try to join the OneRing.net fan club, but I think you had to be 13 or older or something, so I didn't do that. Seeing Two Towers and Return of the King in theaters was electric. I remember a 8-year-old kid sitting next to me during Return of the King, and when Frodo sent Sam away, he went, "No!" During Two Towers, my mom and a family friend were sitting in the row behind my sisters and me, and they were a menace. When Shadowfax appeared, one of them went, "I've seen better horses." When Aragorn had a dream about Arwen after Eowyn had been crushing on him, one of them went, "Guilty conscience, guilty conscience." My main memories of the Lord of the Rings fandom at the time were of scrolling LOTR fan pages on MSN groups and communicating on early chat rooms. I remember a lot of comics from this one artist, Sana Luotonen. Apologies if I butchered the name. Then there were these lists that somebody made that were like 101 things to say if you met Elijah Wood, and some of them were things like, would you marry a goldfish if you were like another goldfish? There were many, many Agent Elrond memes, Cassandra Clare's Very Secret Diaries, and The Lord of the Peeps. And while it did come about 10 years after the fact, I must shout out The Broship of the Rings by N.D. Stevenson of Nimona and She-Ra fame. And of course, one mustn't forget Figwit, played by Bret McKenzie. He was just a background character in Fellowship of the Ring, but the fandom latched onto him and named him Figwit, which stands for Frodo is Great, Who Is That? The filmmakers learned about Figwit and gave him lines in Return of the King.
Lady Arwen, we cannot delay.
Which I love. Fun fact, I did wear a One Ring that came on a Lord of the Rings bookmark, one of many Lord of the Rings bookmarks I owned. I, in fact, collected them, but I wore that One Ring for months at a time. It was definitely made of some sort of cheap metal, and I'm probably very fortunate that my skin wasn't turning green. One time my sister and I recited the first half of The Lord of the Rings while climbing down a mountain. We got to the bottom at around the Council of Elrond scene. One time on New Year's Day, I stood on a street corner in my quiet suburb with some friends holding up a sign that said, "I survived Helm's Deep," and we waved plastic swords at passing cars. Me and one of those same friends also reenacted the They're Taking the Hobbits to Isengard song on her old DV camera. And of course, true fans of the era will also remember
Potatoes! Boil 'em, mash 'em, stick 'em in a stew. Boil 'em, mash 'em, stick 'em in a stew.
I remember obsessing over trailers for the films that were available on the non-extended DVDs. I watched some of these enough times to be obsessed with the music from this 1-2 tower spot with this incredible percussion track.
This Christmas, so it begins.
Or how about the beefed-up orchestral version of the theme Lux Aeterna from the deeply upsetting Darren Aronofsky film Requiem for a Dream that was all over the Two Towers ad campaign?
This Christmas, return to the legend. Return to the journey.
It's called Requiem for a Tower, by the way, and it rules. Or how about this bit of music from a Return of the King trailer that Howard Shore took the time to compose himself?
We cannot achieve victory through strength of arms.
Not for ourselves, but we can give Frodo his chance.
Everybody online was always talking about Legolas's hair care regime and how Frodo and Sam were gay, and it really depended on the people saying it whether or not that was a derogatory statement. But the makers of the films were so aware of it that there's an actual Easter egg on the Return of the King DVD that includes this.
Hobbit on Hobbit.
You bet your ass, Hobbit on Hobbit.
What do we do? I don't know, Fredo, but it feels good to get close.
Oh, huddle up. And whatever happens, happens.
I mean, Ian McKellen was out there in the trenches explaining to these boys how important it would be for Sam to hold Frodo's hand in the Rivendell scene.
When I suggested to Sean that he took Elijah's hand, it was because I thought anyone who knew the book would care about the deep friendship, often of a innocently physical nature, and that might be missed by two resolutely heterosexual actors who mightn't appreciate that gay people like myself saw in a touch something perhaps more meaningful than others might.
Obviously, the reaction of a bunch of straight boys was, at the time, your typical gay panic humor.
Sean Astin, your Hobbit friend, quoted as saying, "You are a beautiful man." You have a comment for Sean, and also there is a, how do I say, a gay connotation. Oh, you laugh, it's funny.
Clearly, they've matured since then, possibly in large part because of their experiences with queer fans of Lord of the Rings.
So I think Sam and Frodo should have kissed. First of all, how do you know they didn't?
I mean, my journey with these films includes a lot of fascination with Arwen because I just thought she was neat. There were no signs of bisexuality when I was 11. What do you mean? I would just attempt to draw her. A lot. I spent a lot of time trying to draw most of this cast because I had a crush on about 75% of them at some point, and Elijah Wood as Frodo Baggins was my first crush. I just loved those baby blues.
You have very big eyes, very big blue eyes.
Uh-huh.
Do you think this is the reason why you are successful and famous? Big blue.
Oh, and anybody remember the Noble Collection? I don't know where we were getting these catalogs from, but my sisters and I positively lusted after these gorgeous movie recreations of Sting or the Evenstar pendant or this ridiculous Lord of the Rings chess set. I actually have Galadriel's ring Nenya. It's definitely not the Noble Collection. It's a knockoff from somewhere, and I love it. Also, I actually found these diary entries from like 2003 where I was trying to articulate what I loved about the music in The Lord of the Rings and just scribbled over several pages. It's basically me attempting audio waveform, I think. By the way, here's my sister's collection of Lord of the Rings merch acquired over the years from conventions, the Noble Collection, and God knows where else. Truly, this obsession does run in the family. My sister and I used to listen to the soundtracks over and over again, and we started to have these in-jokes where we would say the lines from the film on time with the music. I remember doing this line,
What are you doing? The rice is still out there!
But very poorly. Or just going, aww, every time this bit played because I was thinking of...
Sam!
For years, I would write stories that were basically Lord of the Rings ripoffs, complete with fellowships and council scenes and long treks with a lot of walking. I remember comics and fanfiction and so much affection for this piece of art in a version of the internet that basically doesn't exist anymore, so I get a little nostalgic for it sometimes. If pressed to pick a favorite of the film trilogy, I would probably pick The Two Towers, just because The Fellowship of the Ring is saddled with a lot of necessary setup, and Return of the King makes me cry too much. But this whole trilogy gets to me with its unflinching sincerity and kindness. Like, Legolas and Gimli start off as almost this antagonistic comedy duo. But even by The Two Towers, their connection is so genuine that this...
I would cut off your head, dwarf, if it stood but a little higher from the ground.
Garners the following reaction from Legolas.
You would die before your stroke fell.
And by The Return of the King, when Gimli tries to be glib before the final battle,
I thought I'd die fighting side by side with an elf.
Legolas just responds,
What about side by side with a friend? I could do that.
It's just really sweet. Or the devotion in Frodo and Sam's relationship, where Sam nearly drowns trying to follow Frodo at the end of Fellowship.
Sam!
And when he pulls him out of the water, Sam tearfully tells him,
I made a promise, Mr. Frodo. Don't you leave him, Samwise Gamgee. And I don't mean to.
Oh, Sam.
And they just hug, and that's it. They're together on this journey now. And on the slopes of Mount Doom, when Frodo has nearly given up, Sam tells him,
I can't carry it for you. But I can carry you!
And carries the boy up a mountain. Their relationship, however you personally choose to classify it, is such a pure and honest love.
Glad to be with you, Samwise Gamgee. Here at the end of all things.
The relationship between all the hobbits really gets to me. I love the scene at the end of Fellowship of the Ring when Merry realizes Frodo's going to leave them.
What's he doing? He's leaving.
But as they're about to be cornered by orcs, he bravely sets himself and Pippin up as a distraction so Frodo can get away.
Run, Frodo. Go.
Hey! Hey, you! Over here! This way! It's working! I know it's working! Run!
Merry and Pippin throughout the trilogy are just incredible because yes, they're funny, but also Merry has an awareness and maturity that Pippin doesn't for a long time.
There won't be a Shire, Pippin.
Part of what hurts when Merry and Pippin are separated is that Merry realizes what's happening first.
They have to get you out of here. And you're coming with me. Merry, come on.
Both of them are forced out into an unfamiliar world on their own for the first time, and it's hard for both of them, but that's also what makes their reunion so sweet.
I'm going to look after you.
And the relationship that forms between Merry and Éowyn in Return of the King is so gorgeous, because they are both people who want to help and fight for the people they care about, and they are constantly being undervalued and told they would be in the way.
It is a 3-day gallop to Minas Tirith, and none of my riders can bear you as a burden.
I can fight!
No!
So by the time we get to...
Courage, Merry. Courage for our friends.
And...
Stay with me. I'll look after you.
I'm a puddle. And then there's Éowyn and Theoden, who really get me in my feelings. Once Theoden is restored in Two Towers, we see that he is keenly aware of how alone Éowyn has been for a very long time.
Doomed to wait upon an old man who should have loved her as a father.
And by Return of the King, it feels like he has accepted that for a while he simply wasn't able to be the person he wanted to be for everyone in his life, and he's just really sweet with his niece as he lays out his vision for her future as a new leader of Rohan, and she asks,
What other duty would you have me do, my lord?
And he tells her,
I would have you smile again, not grieve, for those whose time has come.
And then she protects him on the battlefield from the Witch King and sits with him in his final moments. And she says she wanted to save him, and he tells her that she already did. I'm literally tearing up just thinking about it. For a long time, I think Theoden was so stuck in his own feelings of failure that he wasn't being present for his loved ones, but by the end, he feels he has done all that he could.
I go to my fathers, in whose mighty company I shall not now feel ashamed.
And he's able to say everything that can be said to help Éowyn towards her own healing journey.
No more despair.
You have to let me go.
Then there's the little things in these films that really get me, like this exchange between Elrond and Aragorn. I can't explain why, but that line, or at least the idea of it, I give hope to others, I keep none for myself, is one of those lines that really sticks with me. Another thing that gets me every time is Legolas reacting to death and loss. It's something he clearly has very little experience with, given he and his people are immortal, so every time he's forced to confront loss, it really hurts to see his confusion. Boromir's death was another big moment that hit, not just the scene itself as he kept getting shot full of arrows trying to protect Merry and Pippin, but his final moments with Aragorn are so fucking tender.
I would have followed you, my brother. My captain, my king. Be at peace, son of Gondor.
And I've mentioned the Grey Haven several times, but when Gandalf first describes that place to Pippin,
white shores, and beyond, a far green country, and to a swift sunrise.
That isn't so bad.
No, it isn't.
I weep. The Grey Haven scene always hurts because it is a death. I mean, they're essentially going to heaven, but it is a kind of death, and so everybody has to say goodbye. Gandalf says,
I will not say do not weep, for not all tears are an evil.
And then they realize Frodo is leaving them as well.
We set out to save the Shire, Sam, and it has been saved, but not for me.
This journey damaged Frodo permanently, in a way he could no longer live with, and so one by one, Merry, Pippin, and Sam say goodbye, and Frodo gives Sam the tenderest kiss on the forehead, and I fucking can't. I have a vivid memory of sitting next to my sister and openly weeping all the way into the credits. Play Annie Lennox's Into the West at my fucking funeral, it's beautiful. To talk about my relationship to The Lord of the Rings feels at once obvious and impossibly personal. The films and the books were there for me through some of the loneliest times in my life, when I had no friends and experienced anti-Semitic bullying on a daily basis. This series and its characters that I was so passionate about were always waiting for me, always honest and earnest and loving. There's so much to say about my love of this story. I could go on and never hit the bottom of what these characters mean to me. I've always loved that Frodo is our hero, not through heroism, but through his sheer normalcy. His down-to-earth, gentle nature is what makes him able to bear evil in its purest form. And when his very human frailty overtakes him in the face of it, Samwise Gamgee, the humble gardener and loyal companion, is there to catch him. And when even that fails, Frodo's empathy towards Gollum and a little luck is what it takes to finally finish the job.
My heart tells me that Gollum has some part to play yet, for good or ill.
The Hobbits are not perfect, not when compared to the kingly Aragorn or the noble elves, but it's their love for each other and a love for the home they left behind that spurs them to heroic acts. In an age where most media seems only able to engage in irony and sarcasm, these stories were unbearably and unflinchingly earnest. But what I love most is that at the heart of The Lord of the Rings, the core of its ethos is love and kindness. Love is what saves them, and kindness is what keeps them. Even death is kind in this universe, and gentle too. White shores that call you home. I feel I've been mourning things all of my life, knowing that the lives I have the privilege of touching will not last forever. I could be quite morbid about that sometimes. I have been haunted by the concept of loss as I experienced it in small doses over my adult life, and the real thing hasn't gotten easier. Then from November of 2023 to November of 2024, I lost my uncle, my dog, my grandpa, my aunt, and my grandma in that order. Some of them went suddenly, and some went slowly. Some I got to say goodbye to, most I didn't. And saying goodbye over WhatsApp to my basically blind and deaf dog while my mom sat and petted her still hurts. I did get to hold my grandma's hand and tell her I loved her before she went, and I'm forever grateful she was able to hold out the day it took for me to fly home to see her. But the thing nobody told me about grief is that each grief is different. It feels different, it tastes different. Because each relationship you're mourning is different, so you can't get accustomed to the process. You can't get practiced at it and handle the next one better, because each one will sit on a different part of your heart and weigh you down. That is, until you get accustomed to bearing that new weight. For a while, I had difficulty trying to write anything after that. I like approaching these videos from a place of joy and enthusiasm. Even when the media in question can be quite dark and sad, I like a bit of silliness. Lord of the Rings was something foundational to me, and something I was rabid about for years, and I wanted to rekindle that very old beacon and bring that chaos to a video. Unfortunately, I just felt numb for months. But then I remembered those white shores and Frodo smiling as he goes to the Grey Havens, finally at peace and getting the most beautiful goodbyes imaginable. I remembered Gandalf telling Pippin that death is not an ending, and that it's gentle and kind. It helps to think about death that way. It reminds me that while my loved ones were in a lot of pain at the end of their lives, they aren't in pain anymore. I take comfort in that, in imagining white shores where all turns to silver glass. Mary Oliver once wrote, "My laughter, as the poet said, was nowhere to be found. Then said my friend Daniel, brave even among lions, it's not the weight you carry, but how you carry it. Books, bricks, grief, it's all in the way you embrace it, balance it, carry it, when you cannot and would not put it down." Originally, this essay was just going to end there, but then my grandmother went into hospice the day Trump won, and she died a few days later, and I still haven't recovered from that 1-2 punch. And given the current state of things, I guess I have to state, Tolkien would loathe the billionaire fascists running the country I live in into the ground while further destroying the environment for capital gains and actively working to disenfranchise pretty much every marginalized community. I mean, Tolkien would be baffled by pretty much everything going on right now, but I would like to remind you he called Hitler an ignorant little cad and thought trees were so neat they should get to talk very, very slowly and break factories with rocks. I know The Lord of the Rings has its flaws, but I do think there are lessons that we can take into the world right now.
Even the smallest person can change the course of the future.
Treebeard claimed to be on nobody's side in the War of the Ring because nobody was on his side, but inaction led to more deaths of his friends. I always find this line particularly heartbreaking.
A wizard should know better!
One would hope that people with all the power would be responsible and caring with it, but they usually aren't, and doing nothing means nothing changes. Even Treebeard changes his tune after that.
My business is with Isengard tonight, with rock and stone.
This story says a lot about moving past personal grievances to be in community with each other in the face of extinction, like Theoden moving past his grief and anger to help his fellow man in need.
Where was Gondor when the Westfold fell? Where was Gondor when our enemies closed in around us?
Gun knuckles for 8!
And Rohan will answer.
Unlike Denethor, who would literally rather self-immolate than do anything to stop what's happening to his own city.
You may triumph in the field of battle for a day, but against the power that is risen in the east, there is no victory.
The Lord of the Rings says a lot about hope in the face of the impossible.
I looked into your future and I saw death.
There is also life.
It's easy to sit in the gloom and doom and give up. It's much harder to get back up after everything's gone wrong and keep going. And in the lightly abridged words of Samwise Gamgee, it's like in the great stories, the ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were. And sometimes you didn't want to know the end, because how could the end be happy when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing, this shadow. Even darkness must pass, and a new day will come, and when the sun shines, it will shine out the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you, that meant something, even if you were too small to understand why. But I think I do understand. I know now. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't. They kept going because they were holding on to something.
What are we holding on to, Sam? That there's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo. And it's worth fighting for.
So fight for trans rights, and people of color, and Jews and Muslims, and this earth that we're living on, and hold true to each other. Be a fellowship, and a force for good, because even the smallest person can change the course of the future. So, in a hilariously apt turn of events, there is an extended edition of this video because Warner Brothers is apparently ridiculous when it comes to their copyright, so if you want to hear me talk more about Howard Shore, you can check that out on Nebula. Nebula is a creator-owned streaming service where creators are free to explore ideas which don't work on an ad-supported platform like YouTube. And it's where hundreds of creators are making exclusive content that you can't find anywhere else. For example, Abigail Thorne's short film Dracula's Ex-Girlfriend or Jesse Gender's Identities. You can find ad-free content and early releases from creators like Jacob Gellar, Jesse Gender, Princess Weeks, Mike the Snare, and Maggie Mayfish. And for those of you that want to share Nebula with your friends and family, Nebula is offering annual gift cards. And you can even send a gift card to someone who already has a Nebula account. They would just get a free year added to their balance and won't be charged for a year. So use the link gift.nebula.tv/Lady Knight the Brave to give a year of Nebula to a friend for just $36. Thanks! So thank you for watching all the way until the end. I do apologize for this one taking like 9 months or whatever, but I was having a bout of mental health for all the reasons mentioned in the video. So I would like to take this moment to sincerely thank my patrons who have basically been helping me pay my rent this whole time. Your support is deeply appreciated. And with all that said, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.